Chapter 1725. Chaos School adhered to the philosophy of letting children grow up happily, so the end-of-term party was held before the final exams. There was no segment to commend students for their excellent grades, but before the performance, there was an award ceremony for encouragement awards such as the Moral Star, Helpful Star, Contributing Student, and so on in order to set an example. Next, congratulations to student Amy from the second class for winning the Contributing Student Award this semester. She and the Chaos School representative team defeated the Roth Empire representative team and made an outstanding contribution, the vice principal said with a smile. Amy, you won the award. Daphne jumped up from her seat. She was even happier than when she had just won the Moral Star. And it's the Contributing Student Award that only gives one person. Ignatsu was also very excited. I think so. Amy was a little confused. But I didn't do anything. I didn't even come to class often. How did I win the award? Go, you deserve it. Meg patted her head with a smile. Amy nodded. She stood up and skipped toward the stage. The Contributing Student Award was given to a student from the second class. How surprising, a parent of a senior said with a hint of jealousy. Many parents were also somewhat puzzled by this. After all, this was the most valuable award. Over the years, it was given to some senior students who had made outstanding contributions to the school, but this time, it was actually given to a student who had just entered the school for a year. Mother, you didn't watch that battle. If it weren't for Junior Amy turning the tide, our Chaos School would have lost to the Magus Tower. She deserves this award. Her son retorted mercilessly. Then, he looked ahead with stars in his eyes, and said, Look, she's so cute when she's skipping. Yes, Junior Amy is the legend of our Chaos School. She's super cute and super powerful. The students spontaneously explained to the parents. They had no doubts about the award. Amy skipped to the front of the stage. She looked up, and her vision was blocked. She seemed to be a little stunned. She's blocked. Daphne's eyes lit up as she looked at Amy's back. She's so cute even when she's in a daze. But there are clearly steps at the side. Ignatsu covered his face. Meg also laughed involuntarily. Just now, the little fellow was busy reviewing the content of her performance and did not pay attention to how the students who went up on stage to receive the award walked. The stairs on both sides were hidden on the side and could not be seen at a glance. Why did she stop? You can't find your way up the stage. Are you bothered by the lack of stairs? So, we can only walk in a straight line. My junior is so cute. The vice president, who was standing in the middle of the stage, could only see half of Amy's rabbit ear. He was also wondering why she had stopped and was not going on stage. Did everyone jump up? Amy looked at the stage in front of her with a puzzled look on her face. However, she did not see any stairs leading up to the stage. It seemed like this was a test set by the school for everyone. After figuring that out, Amy bent her knees slightly and jumped up the stage with a whoosh. She landed steadily in front of the vice president, her two rabbit ears swaying. The vice president was startled by the sudden jump. However, looking at the little fellow in front of him who was looking at him obediently, a smile appeared on his face unconsciously. He chuckled and said, You are so energetic, little student. You are so energetic even when you are on stage. A burst of kind laughter also sounded in the auditorium. They could not blame such an adorable little fellow at all. Congratulations, student Amy. I hope you can continue to be so energetic and energetic. The vice president solemnly handed the medal in his hand to Amy. Thank you. Amy bowed to the vice president. Before the applause ended, she happily jumped down from the stage with the medal in her hands and skipped all the way back to her seat. The vice president looked at Amy, who had already returned to her seat, and could only swallow the words of encouragement that he had prepared. Of course, Amy's contribution to Chaos School was not limited to helping them defeat the Magus Tower and the elite academy of the Empire. Because of Amy, Chaos School had a melee magic class taught by Crassus, a super magic room, and several teaching buildings. Such contributions could not be measured by a student contribution medal. Alright. Next, please enjoy the formal banquet hosted by the students. The vice president did not say much, and went straight to the point. Father, look, my medal. Amy stuffed the medal into Meg's hand, and her little face was full of praise me. The base was gold, and the school's logo was engraved in red. The words Student Contribution Medal were not tacky, but there were 3 little silver stars engraved in the upper left corner, and there was a pin at the back that could be directly pinned to the collar. The design was quite good. Amy is so awesome. Meg smiled and patted her head. This little fellow had adapted to school life very well, and was liked by her classmates. She was much better than he was back then. After all, he was liked by too many female classmates back then, and became the public enemy of the male classmates. But Amy was different. Even Daphne was almost her little fangirl. Hee hee. Amy smiled happily, as if she was happier to be praised by Meg than to receive the medal. After the announcement of the children's performance began. Meg had not seen a performance like this ever since he graduated from elementary school. The children's performance was a little clumsy, and it was full of childish singing. Watching with Amy was quite interesting. Luna came over to remind Amy to get ready to go on stage. Amy stood up, and looked at Meg seriously as she said, "Father, I'm going backstage to prepare. You have to sit here obediently and watch my performance." I'll sit here obediently." Meg nodded with a smile. "Amy, you can do it." Daphne clenched her little fists and encouraged. "Remember to go up the stage from the side," Ignazio reminded her softly. Amy nodded, and followed Luna to the back of the stage. "Uncle, what is Amy going to perform?" Daphne asked Meg curiously. "Yeah, she didn't even want to tell us." Ignazio was also curious. "She didn't tell me either, but we'll know in a while." Meg shook his head with a smile. It seemed that the little fellow was very good at keeping secrets. She would practice in her room every day during rehearsals, and would not reveal any information at all. The performance continued, and after 2 performances, the little MC announced, "Next, we would like to invite Amy from Class 2 to perform a solo dance for us, Rabbit Dance." Chapter 17:26. The stage gradually darkened, and suddenly, a beam of light shone on the center of the stage. Amy, who was wearing a little white dress and a bunny-eared hat, appeared in front of everyone. The audience's eyes lit up. What an adorable little girl. She looked like a little angel. Although it wasn't the first time they had seen her, they still couldn't help but want to go up and pinch her adorable little face. Meg also looked at Amy with a smile. The little girl's confidence made him feel very gratified. She was no longer the timid and pitiful little girl he had first met. She now had the courage to rehearse her own program and sign up to perform in front of thousands of people. As for the bunny dance, Meg had actually guessed it from Amy's outfit. However, in order to keep Amy mysterious, he pretended that he didn't know anything the whole time. Right at this moment, lively music began to play. Amy also danced to the music, jumping on the stage like a cute little bunny. She accurately stepped on every drum beat, her bunny ears rising and falling, sometimes standing up, and sometimes drooping. Her smile was confident and calm, but her eyes would occasionally drift in Meg's direction, as if to confirm that Meg wasn't paying attention. "Ah, so cute." The somewhat magical music, coupled with Amy's adorable dance, made the auditorium go wild. The children cheered, and the parents couldn't help but smile. "Aw, Wade died again." Daphne slumped into her chair again. "Although this dance feels a little strange, I have to admit, it's really quite cute," Ignatzu said seriously. "Little Amy is so awesome." Luna also looked at Amy with a smile. She had seen the changes in the little girl during this time, and she couldn't help but look at Meg. During this time, Mr. Meg had fulfilled his responsibilities as a father. It should be said that he was more responsible than many fathers. The short 4 minutes brought great joy to everyone. The music stopped, and Amy bowed slightly to the audience. The audience burst into thunderous applause, and the cheers almost overturned the roof of the auditorium. "Is this applause for me?" Amy looked at the audience with a little surprise. After thinking about it, she bowed to both sides of the stage, then jumped off the stage and ran toward Meg. She wanted to ask her father if she danced well. The beam of light followed her until she jumped into Meg's arms. Meg picked Amy up and said with a smile, "Amy did a great job." "Really?" Amy stared at Meg seriously. "Of course. Everyone's applause is the best proof." Meg nodded seriously too. "Thank you, Father." Amy hugged Meg's neck and kissed him on the cheek. "Why are you thanking me?" Meg asked with a smile. "Meg, Amy's Amy," Amy said without hesitation. Then she leaned close to Meg's ear and said, "If only Mother was here. But it's okay. I can dance for her alone when I go back." What an enviable father and daughter pair. The audience watched this scene with smiles on their faces. When the beam of light disappeared and landed on the stage again, the young MC started to announce the next program. No one noticed that a white figure appeared for a while on the eaves of the auditorium and then disappeared. At the textile factory in the north of the city. Irina looked at Ashley and said, "Help these elves settle down. Their injuries have all been treated, but they have suffered a lot in that underground cellar, so we need to give them some psychological guidance." "Yes, Your Highness." Ashley nodded. She looked at Irina's blood-stained dress and asked worriedly, "Your Highness, are you injured?" "It's not my blood." Irina waved her sleeves, and the bloodstains at the corner of her dress disappeared. She coldly said, "There are still some fellows in the demon race who don't know how to repent. Get someone to copy this letter to every demon race. If there are still any races that force us elves to stay or help the wind forest to harm the elves, they will be seen as the night elves' mortal enemies. I will make them pay 100 times the price." "Yes," Ashley replied with a solemn expression as she received the letter with both hands. The factory's production cannot be neglected, but the elves' cultivation cannot be neglected either. If the night elves want to have a foothold on the Norland continent, they must have the ability to protect themselves, and not pin their hopes on Chaos City's protection. Irina touched her ring, and a small mountain of rare treasures and all kinds of spirit stones appeared on the ground. "Only by being powerful can we protect ourselves." "Yes." Ashley nodded solemnly. "I'm tired. I'll take my leave first," Irina said. A golden glow flashed under her feet, and she disappeared from the spot. Ashley called a few elves over, and began to count the resources that Irina left behind. The gala lasted until 9 p.m. at night before it ended. There was also a live award ceremony. Amy's rabbit dance won the most popular award, which was well-deserved. "Goodbye, Daphne, Ignatzu." Amy waved to her little friends from the back seat of the bicycle. Then, she anxiously said to Meg, "Father, hurry up. We have to go home quickly." "Why are you in such a hurry, Meg?" Meg asked with a smile as he pedaled the bicycle. "Because I have to go back to perform the rabbit dance for Mother. What if she falls asleep when I get back late?" Amy said matter-of-factly. All right. Sit tight then. Meg sped up the bicycle and overtook horse-drawn carriages. They arrived at Amy's building in less than 10 minutes. The lights are on. Amy jumped off the bicycle and exclaimed in surprise when she saw the restaurant's lights on. Mother must be back. Indeed, the restaurant's door opened from the inside before Meg could stop the bicycle and open the door. Irina stood at the door and looked at the father and daughter with a smile. Mother. Amy jumped into Irina's arms. However, she quickly began to show off the medals and certificates hanging on her chest. Mother, look. This is my student contribution medal. This is the certificate for the most popular award I won for my dance. Father said that everyone claps and cheers the loudest when I dance, so he gave it to me. Irina is great. Irina's eyes were filled with a gentle smile. I was going to record it with a shadow recording stone for you to see, but Amy said she wanted to come back and dance for you to see. Meg moved the bicycle in and closed the door. I want to dance alone for Mother to see. Amy nodded her little head. All right, then Amy will dance for me. Irina nodded. She turned her head to look at Meg and said in a coquettish tone, I want to eat grilled fish. I'm hungry. Meg looked at the usually noble and cold Irina looking at him coquettishly and couldn't help but be a little stunned. After a while, he came back to his senses and nodded. All right, Irina. What do you want to eat? You did very well today. Father will satisfy whatever you want to eat. Amy thought seriously for a while and said, then. I want to eat grilled mutton skewers and strawberry ice cream. All right, please wait a moment. Meg helped Amy move a table away and went straight into the kitchen. Chapter 1727. Your Highness, I heard from them that His Highness the Second Prince will be representing the Roth Empire to attend the various races meeting in Chaos City in 2 days' time. Laura walked into the room with a plate of desserts as she looked at Vanessa, who was writing something seriously on the table. Chaos City. Vanessa stopped writing. She looked up at Laura, and curiously asked, Isn't the peace conference starting in 10 days' time? Besides, Royal Father would definitely go to such an important conference himself. Why would he let Second Royal Brother go? I don't know about that. Laura shook her head. Humph. This is definitely not a very important meeting, but since Second Royal Brother is going, then I think I should go too. Royal Father is being biased. Vanessa put down her pen, stood up, and walked out. Your Highness, it's already so late. Where are you going? Laura quickly put down the desserts in her hand, and followed her anxiously. I'm going to look for Royal Father. I want to go to Chaos City too. Every day feels like a year without hot pot, Vanessa said angrily. I'm afraid His Majesty has already gone to bed. You'd better not go. Laura tugged at Vanessa's sleeve gently. She regretted mentioning Chaos City to the princess. He won't go to bed so early. I'm just going to take a look at his study. If he's not there, then forget it. Vanessa continued walking. Laura knew the princess's temper. She wasn't someone she could persuade easily, so she had no choice but to keep up with her. In the royal study, Andre looked at Josh, who was standing, and said, You just have to observe this trip to Chaos City. You don't have to make any statements, nor do you have to give any promises. It's just an unofficial meeting of the various races. It's appropriate to showcase the power of our empire, but don't make our intentions too obvious. I understand. Josh nodded slightly. He hesitated for a moment before saying, What should I do if there are any contracts to be signed during the meeting? The peace conference is in 10 days' time. Any contracts should be discussed by the adults. It's not up to you to decide. Andre smirked disdainfully. Yes. Josh lowered his head as a strange red glow flashed across his eyes. Imperial Father. I want to go to Chaos City too. I want to go with second brother too. Just then, Vanessa's voice came from outside. Where did this lass get the news from? Andre laughed involuntarily and said to the people outside, "Let the princess in." Vanessa walked in hurriedly, and took a look at Josh. She immediately tugged at Andre's hand, and coquettishly said, "Royal Father, I'm going to Chaos City too. Second brother is here too, so let me go with him. I promise I'll be good, and I won't create any trouble." Andre looked at Vanessa with a doting smile on his face. He shook his head, and said, "I'm afraid not this time. Josh has important matters to attend to, so he can't take you out to play." Vanessa shook her head, and said, "It's all right. I'm much more familiar with Chaos City than he is. I can play by myself, and I don't need him to bring me around. Besides, isn't Uncle Abraham still there? I can play with him, so you don't have to worry." Royal Father has never spoken to me with such a smile before. You really don't hide your love for me. Josh looked at the two of them with a deep gaze, but he still had a gentle smile on his face. He said to Andre, "Royal Father, let Vanessa come with me. The round trip will only take 3 days. I'll bring her back safely." Andre glanced at Josh with furrowed brows. Vanessa was pleasantly surprised, and said, "Royal Father, second brother has already agreed. Don't worry, I'll be a good girl." "All right, then you'll go to Chaos City with Josh." Andre nodded, and then sternly said, "But don't think of running away this time. Otherwise, I'll get someone to bring you back." Vanessa nodded. She thought for a while, and said, "But, Royal Father, didn't you say you wanted to thank Mr. Mac properly for curing my teeth? Why don't you take this opportunity to thank him? I'll hand it over to him personally. I remember the reward for curing my teeth was 1 million copper coins." "Yes, we should thank him properly." Andre nodded. He looked at Josh, and said, "Josh, when you reach Chaos City, follow Vanessa to meet Mr. Mac. Hand him the reward and express your gratitude to him." "Yes, Royal Father." Josh nodded slightly. At the City Lord's castle, Dicus walked into the conference room, and said to Michael, "City Lord, the official venue has been arranged. However, although the scale of this meeting is not as grand as the peace conference, it will still gather all the representatives. Isn't it a little too casual to hold the first meeting at Mamie's?" "Casual? Of course not." Michael shook his head with a smile. "Mamie's is the #1 restaurant in Chaos City. It's our city's name card. Even I, the City Lord, have to go and negotiate with them personally if I want to book the whole place. Such a venue is much better than any conference room in the City Lord's castle. Moreover, every meeting where all the major races gather is very tense. There are many cases where fights break out at the venue. Then Mamie's won't be able to withstand a fight," Dicus said with a raised brow. "Mr. Mac's delicacies can soothe restless hearts, and help all the representatives calm down quickly. This is a good start for the negotiation. This is also the reason why I chose Mamie's," Michael said with a smile. "Then, please confirm the seating arrangements again. For example, how should the seating arrangements for the Night Elves and the Wind Forest be arranged?" Amy's rabbit dance was praised by Irina. After supper, the little one quickly fell asleep in Meg's arms. Meg placed the little one back on the bed, and went downstairs again. He got 2 glasses of beer and sat opposite Irina again. "Michael came to find me this morning, and said he wanted to book the whole place for the meeting," Meg said after taking a sip of beer. "I know. The Night Elves have also received the invitation." Irina picked up a piece of fish and ate it. She was not surprised by Meg's news. The dragons intend to lead the world to maintain peace. This is a good thing. But this world is no longer easily led by the dragons. You should know better than me how powerful the Roth Empire is, Irina said to Meg as she raised her glass. Meg was silent. Even without him, the Roth Empire was still powerful enough to crush any other race apart from the dragons. The huge population had given birth to countless powerful knights and magic casters. They were also proficient in spell formations and cooperation. Coupled with the huge number of the Empire's iron cavalry, once a war broke out, the normal races would not be able to resist it. As long as Andrei isn't stupid, he shouldn't lay his hands on the other races before getting rid of the great old ones. Meg shook his head with a smile. He then looked at Irina and said, "The Wind Forest should be sending people to participate in this negotiation, right?" "I'll kill whoever comes," Irina said calmly after taking a sip of beer. Chapter 17:28. Due to the incident with the Great Old Ones, Amy was granted a holiday before the Chaos Academy's holidays after a negotiation between the Crassus and Julian. Amy, who had just woken up, sat up from the bed and looked at Meg in surprise as she said, "In other words, from today onwards, I can sleep in at home every day. I don't have to go to school or the potion shop, and I only have to play with Ugly Duckling at home." "Yes, the holiday officially begins today." Meg looked at Amy with a smile. It seemed like this little fellow had also been looking forward to the winter holiday for a long time. "That's great." Amy jumped up from the bed and kicked Ugly Duckling off the bed. She jumped on the bed for a while before jumping into Meg's arms. She looked up at him expectantly, and said, "I don't want to sleep in. I want to go and play with Jessica. Can I?" "Of course." Meg raised his hand and looked at his watch. "However, if you want me to send you there, then you have to get up and wash up now before going downstairs to eat." "Okay." Amy obediently let go of Meg's neck. She jumped off the bed and opened the wardrobe. She chose a white down jacket and a pair of cute white furry shoes for herself. She turned to look at Meg and said, "Father, I want to wear these clothes and shoes today. I also want to comb my hair into two tails." "No problem. Leave it to me." Meg nodded with a smile. Double ponytails and whatnot were simply hairstyles for him now. "But, Father, where did Mother go? Why didn't I see her this morning?" Amy asked curiously while combing her hair. "She's been a little busy recently. She went out after a simple breakfast," Meg replied with a smile. "Irina went to the Demon Islands yesterday and brought back a batch of elves." "Oh." Amy nodded obediently and didn't ask any more questions. She changed the topic and talked about some of the interesting things that happened today. After breakfast, Meg sent Amy to Jessica's house on his bicycle. The two little fellows hadn't seen each other for a while, and they had endless things to talk about when they met. Meg gave Amy a few words of advice before riding off on his bicycle. "Where's my car? It was still here yesterday." Meg had just turned out of the alley on his bicycle when he heard a sharp and unbelievable voice. Meg turned his head sideways to take a look. A middle-aged man with greasy hair was scratching his hair with a melancholic expression. Not far away, there were 6 or 7 passers-by watching the show. "What car is it? Is it very pretty?" An old man teased him. "It's not pretty. It's very special. It's long and square. It's not something that ordinary people can have. Its license plate number is. The middle-aged man scratched his head anxiously and said with a sad face, "Why can't I remember? I'm so sad, so guilty, and so guilty. Uncle, there's an ox cart draped in crocodile skin in the alley. Go and see if it's yours," Meg reminded him as he rode past on his bicycle. The middle-aged man was taken aback when he heard that. He turned and ran into the alley. After a short while, his surprised voice sounded from the alley. "It's really here." "Thank you, young man." Meg smiled. He was most likely another drunkard who was muddle-headed. After riding back to the restaurant, Meg was busy handing out hot porridge to the cleaners. A bowl of congee with pork and century egg had become the most anticipated job benefit for the cleaners in the Aden Square. It had also helped them survive this exceptionally cold winter. Before the morning service began, Meg announced at the dining table, "The restaurant is closed in 2 days. I promised Castellan Michael to provide a venue and dining service for a meeting. Those who have something to do on that day don't have to come. All the major races will send their representatives for this meeting. Those who need to avoid it can also choose not to come." Ahem. "I have an appointment that day, so I won't be coming." Camilla coughed awkwardly. "I need to avoid it," Elizabeth said directly. "I don't think it's appropriate for me to be there." Shirley shook her head slightly. "Will the Wind Forest send people here as well?" Phyllis asked in a low voice with a worried expression. "You can rest assured," Meg said with a smile. "Okay." Phyllis nodded obediently. She was worried that she would implicate the restaurant. Yabamiya smiled and said, "I'm fine. I can come to work." Then, Gina, Jane, Raina, and Angela all said that they could come to work. "Okay, let's do that. There aren't many people anyway, so it won't be busier than usual. If they can't handle it, we can arrange for them to eat hot pot," Meg said with a smile. "If they eat hot pot, will they fight because they took someone's beef?" Anna asked worriedly. Meg thought for a while, and it was not impossible. "It seems like we can't eat hot pot. If a race war breaks out because of a piece of beef, we can't bear the responsibility." "Is Barbara's assignment not over yet?" "She hasn't returned to the dormitory for a few days," Mia asked. The others also looked at Meg with concern. "She's been deployed by the City Lord's castle to do something that's highly confidential. I don't know when she'll be back, but I'm sure there won't be any problems." Meg smiled. Babla was saving the world right now. "Okay, everyone, tidy up and get ready for business." Meg stood up and walked to the door. The door opened, and the day's work officially began. After the morning service, Harrison, who had been waiting outside for a while, came in. He looked at Meg and said, "Mr. Mack, I have something to say to you. Are you free now? Then let's talk outside. They should be cleaning the restaurant." Meg led Harrison out of the door again. Actually, he also wanted to ask Harrison if the orc father and son's dream had come true. His mission had not been completed yet. "Do you still remember that orc bro that George and I brought over a few days ago?" Harrison went straight to the point, and asked the question that Meg wanted to ask. Meg nodded, and asked with concern, "Yes. Is there any progress on their mutton restaurant? George and I have been running around for a few days. He said he couldn't steal your business in the Aden Square, so he found a shop for him at the west side of the city. He's been busy with the renovation for the past 2 days." Harrison nodded with a smile, and then took out a document from his pocket. "I'm here to talk to you about this. The 3 of us have teamed up to open this mutton restaurant. George and I will pay for the shop, and Brother Lydon will be in charge of the culinary skills. We each own half of the shares, but Brother Lydon said he would give half of his share to you. I just got the partnership contract out today, so I'm here to ask you to sign it." "I didn't do anything. How did I get 25% of the shares?" Meg looked at Harrison with confusion. "You can't say that. If you hadn't selflessly shared how to prepare the mutton, we wouldn't have been able to make this mutton stew." Harrison looked at Meg with a smile, and said, "These are Brother Lydon's words. He's busy trying out the mutton flavor in the shop today. Otherwise, he would have come to thank you personally. You can keep these shares with peace of mind. Meg thought for a while, and nodded. Then I'll thank you in advance, but I won't take the dividends from these shares. When the time comes, please help me gather them, and donate them to Teacher Luna's foundation in the name of the mutton restaurant. All right, I'll make the necessary arrangements. Include my share and donate them together. Harrison nodded with a smile, and praised, I heard that teacher is a practical person. She manages the foundation very well. Even an old piece of clothing will be publicized. She built a school building for the children, gave them winter clothes and food, and helped a lot of children. Chapter 1729. Of course Miss Luna is different from those people. Meg nodded with a smile. As one of the first partners of the foundation, Meg would receive a public notice of the foundation's operations every month. The direction of every fund, the source of every resource, everything was organized in an orderly manner. Her efforts could be seen from the form. Harrison kept the contract, and asked Mag, oh, right. There's one more thing. The day after tomorrow is a good day. We intend to open for business right away. I wonder if Boss Mag is free to come and support us. Meg thought for a moment and said, then I'll come over after the morning service. Okay, then it's settled. I'll go back and let them know. Harrison walked toward the horse-drawn carriage with a smile. Meg watched the horse-drawn carriage disappear into the distance, and also turned to enter the restaurant with a smile. Harrison was someone who did not lack money. He did this purely out of kindness. However, it was also good. Half of the profits from this mutton restaurant would go to the foundation. It should be able to help many children. The restaurant was cleaned, and everyone left. Only Angela stayed. Aren't you going back to the dormitory to rest? Meg walked out of the kitchen with a pot of black tea. He was a little surprised to see Angela standing still in the restaurant. The morning work was very easy. I'm not tired at all. Angela only felt that she was sitting opposite Meg. She looked at Meg, who was pouring tea for himself, and looked at him with some scrutiny. Meg pushed a cup of black tea in front of her, and looked at her through the mist. He asked, what's the matter? I'm a little curious. Angela's blue eyes were still staring at him. Being curious about a man is often the beginning of falling, Meg said calmly as he picked up the teacup and blew on it. I won't fall for a man. Angela pursed her lips. Meg glanced at Angela. He did not expect Angela and Camilla to have the same taste. Don't be curious about a woman so easily. Otherwise, you'll fall for her. Angela smiled seductively. You're still lacking. Meg retracted his gaze. Angela's smile froze, revealing a hint of anger. No man had ever ignored her like this. However, looking at Meg, she quickly felt relieved and said indifferently, it's okay. I know you have your difficulties. I can understand. Hidden troubles. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. These words were tantamount to saying that he was incapable. How could a man say no? Or, do you like men? Angela's eyes gradually brightened. She felt that she had found the key point. Then I won't hire you as a waitress. Meg rolled his eyes. This girl really dared to think of anything. That's true. Angela nodded. Mamie's only had waitresses, and every one of them was an outstanding beauty. Most people would only think that the boss was a capable and lecherous guy. Of course, she admitted the former. Meg was indeed the most capable human male she had ever seen. Just by cooking a lot of delicious food, he could set the rules and make powerful people listen to him. As for the latter, she hadn't seen Mag harassing any of the service staff until now, nor had she heard any lady bad-mouthing him or complaining that he was being touchy. No matter who he was to, he was always polite and courteous. And this was the most puzzling part. Although Meg had a daughter, no one had ever seen the boss's wife. A rich and handsome man surrounded by beauties, with a lot of women waiting to marry him, yet he had no scandals. Looks like you really can't. Angela sighed. Usually, women who say such things will get some unusual stories because of the man's reverse psychology. Meg glanced at Angela. No matter how he looked at her, she was indeed a breathtaking beauty. Angela leaned back in her chair nervously. She felt that Meg's eyes seemed to see through her. But unfortunately, I'm not that kind of man. Meg took a sip of tea and leaned back in his chair comfortably. He smiled and said, maintaining a gentleman's demeanor is a compulsory lesson. As for whether I can do it or not, it's not up to you to test. I don't want to try. Angela blushed. Although she had gone out and met many people in the past few days, she still felt like she was being teased by Meg. Meg smiled. An unqualified succubus wanted to fight with him. Her skills were too shallow. He said with the attitude of a victor, "Say it, what is it?" Ahem. Angela coughed twice to hide her embarrassment. Her gaze was a little erratic as she said, "I'm just a little curious. Why is Princess Irina staying in the restaurant? I heard she has a man, and a very powerful man." "Yes, her man is me, the handsome man in front of you." Meg raised his eyebrows and said, "How powerful is he?" "I heard he can go anywhere with a 200-meter-long sword in his hand. He can chop off the head of a giant dragon with one slash, so he's called the Dragon Slayer Warrior. I also heard that he was ambushed by dozens of 10th-tier powerhouses on a rainy night 3 years ago. He killed dozens of 10th-tier powerhouses on the spot and then flew away. I also heard that he appeared again 3 years later. He saved the beauty and killed the demon ancestor. He showed off his power by stepping on the wind forest. He threw pigs at the giant dragon on Dragon Island." Angela became more and more excited as she spoke. In the end, she said with a look of admiration, "Such a man is really admirable. There's such a thing." Meg raised his eyebrows and looked at Angela with a slightly strange expression. "You're a chef. You don't know how to slay a dragon." Angela had an expression of, "I don't blame you for being ignorant." "Probably." Meg nodded and said, "Then, have you fallen in love with him?" "I think all the women in the world would be fascinated by him. Such a powerful and perfect man. Unfortunately, I don't like men." Angela thought for a while and said, "Of course, if it's him, maybe. I can give it a try." "You're a little unprincipled." Meg leaned back to keep a safe distance. "That's not important." Angela pressed on the table and leaned forward again. She stared at Meg and said, "Now, such a powerful man's woman is actually living in the same house as you, and on the same floor. It's said that she's even sleeping in the bed you slept in before. Are you worried?" "So, I'm indirectly sleeping with Alex's woman." Meg covered his heart and said with a face of fear, "I'm so scared." "That's right." Angela nodded with satisfaction. She leaned closer to Meg and whispered, "Now, there's a solution. Do you want to hear it?" "What solution?" Meg cooperated and asked in a low voice. "Why don't you let her live in my dormitory first? I can put myself to sleep on the floor. Who told me to be so obsessed with her beauty? You can't hold back your smile." Meg curled his lips and looked at Angela with a funny expression. "Help you woo my wife? You're really daring." "No, I'm just a little excited just thinking about it." Angela covered her mouth. "You can raise this suggestion to her yourself. I don't have any objections anyway." Meg brewed another cup of tea for himself and waved his hand. Ugly Duckling, which was lying on the counter, slid to the floor unwillingly while hugging the edge. Then, it jumped onto his lap, and placed its head on his hand skillfully, allowing him to stroke its head. Chapter 1730. Angela left excitedly after drinking a cup of tea. She was already thinking about how to give her suggestion to Irina calmly. Meg stroked the cat with one hand, and held a book with the other as he curled up comfortably in his chair. The warm sunlight shone on him through the floor-to-ceiling glass, and he felt so comfortable that he wanted to doze off. However, Meg couldn't sleep at this moment, and was deep in thought. Regardless of whether it was the Great Old One who was about to break the seal or the peace talks that were going to be held in 10 days, they were all events that could affect the situation on the Norland continent. And he had no choice but to step into this whirlpool. The existence of the Great Old One obviously wasn't limited to just one head under the thunderstorm mountains. Since the seal on this head couldn't seal that octopus monster anymore, did that mean that the seals in other places could also be broken? There might even be a Great Old One who had broken free from the seal. This was a very bad possibility, but it was a possibility that couldn't be ruled out. That horrifying mural could be a scene from the past, or it could be a sign of the Norland continent's future. No matter which angle one looked at it from, the Great Old One was an enemy that all the races on the Norland continent had to work together to defeat. Hence, the various races had to be clear about the situation that the Norland continent was going to face in the various races' secret meetings 2 days later so that all the races could sign a new peace treaty in the peace talks 10 days later, and even form an alliance to fight against the Great Old One. Compared to the train that has already completed its test run, the appearance of the Great Old One is easier to facilitate all of this. Meg pursed his lips. However, this wasn't a good thing, either. Hades walked into the meeting room quickly, and said, "City Lord, the chiefs of the Golden Dragons and the Frost Dragons are here. Invite them to the meeting room." Michael put down the documents in his hands, and got up to leave. "City Lord Michael, is what you said in the letter true? Did you really discover the existence of the devil near Chaos City? And it's about to break the seal?" The moment Michael entered the meeting room, the tall Lewis had already taken a step forward, and asked with a grave expression. Douglas, who was wearing an ice-blue robe, also had a grave expression. The Golden Colossal Dragons and Frost Colossal Dragons were ranked in the top 10 among the Dragon Tribe. They could basically represent the Dragon Tribe's attitude. Of course it's true. The ones who discovered the sealed land weren't the City Lord's castle or the Grey Temple. Instead, it was Crassus, Julian, and Irina. They were the ones who stopped the demonic chi from leaking out in time. They even went deep into the underground perilous area to investigate the sealed land of the devil. Michael nodded. Lewis and Douglas, as the most respected giant dragons of the dragon race, had personally come here in advance. This was enough to show how important this matter was to them. I see. Lewis was deep in thought. Crassus and Julian had been famous powerhouses on the Norland continent for a long time, and Irina had been in the limelight recently. Is it convenient for you to take us there now? Douglas asked. Sure. Novin and the rest are still trying to repair the spell formation, but the situation isn't optimistic. The spell formation masters in Chaos City aren't of much help, and we urgently need more spell formation masters. Follow me. Michael turned and walked out of the door. After a short while, a black Cheelin flew out from the City Lord's castle. 2 giant dragons, one golden and one silver, rose into the sky after it, and disappeared in the sky above Chaos City in the blink of an eye. The Great Temple had already taken over the area around the Thunderstorm Mountains. Anyone who tried to get close to or enter the mountains would be arrested and brought back. They would only be released after a strict investigation. Of course, there were also those who were thrown into jail directly. Although most of the Grey Temple's members didn't know what had appeared in the Thunderstorm Mountains, the 5th orders told them that the things inside were very important, and were not allowed to be discussed. Michael led Lewis and Douglas to the core area of the Thunderstorm Mountains. After showing his City Lord's token to the Grey Temple's members, he brought them into a concealment spell formation. "What a strong evil aura," Lewis said with a frown as he looked at the black hole that appeared on the ground. "It's an aura that can make even us feel threatened. It's very powerful." Douglas' expression also became very serious. He hadn't felt threatened for a long time, but now, he felt like he was being surrounded by threats. "Let's go. You will be even more shocked later." Michael jumped into the hole first. Douglas and Lewis exchanged glances before jumping into the black hole as well. The descent lasted for a while. The deeper they went, the stronger the evil aura became. A layer of frost had already appeared on the surface of Douglas' body to isolate the evil aura, while Lewis's body was also emitting a faint golden light. Michael walked in front, and the two of them followed behind cautiously. This method of entering the underground was a little familiar to them. The situation was more troublesome than they had expected. The murals under the Golden Dragon Island had already given them enough warning, but this terrifying aura still caught them off guard. After passing through the long tunnel, a huge mural appeared in everyone's sight at the end of the tunnel. "It's the same mural," Lewis exclaimed. He looked at the horrifying mural that was exactly the same as the one under the Golden Dragon Island in disbelief. "Could that guy be sealed behind this mural?" Douglas asked with a solemn expression. "Yes." Michael nodded. He looked at Lewis and said, "I wonder if the great old overlords are also sealed behind the mural under the Golden Dragon Island." Lewis frowned and shook his head. "A few days ago, I gathered over a dozen top powerhouses to look at the mural together, but I didn't discover any evil aura." "But we haven't confirmed if there's another space behind the mural," Douglas added. "You mean, there might be a devil sealed behind every mural?" Lewis's brows were already tightly knitted together. "Or maybe half of it." Michael activated the stone door switch, and the stone door slowly opened to both sides. A terrifying octopus that was a few hundred meters tall suddenly pounced forward. The dark green mucus made it look like it had just crawled out of the sinful swamp. There were countless eyeballs on its body and tentacles that emitted a demonic red glow. Even with Lewis and Douglas' 10th tier strength and 1,000 years of age, they still took a few steps back subconsciously. The golden armor and frost armor were already activated, and they instantly entered battle mode. Bam! With a dull thud, that octopus monster crashed into the seal, causing the seal to tremble. However, it didn't break the seal in the end. TSK. So there are things that giant dragons are afraid of too. Crassus walked out of the door with his hands behind his back, and chuckled at the two of them. Bookhouse Reading Website. Chapter 1731. Being wary of an unknown and powerful existence can indeed be called fear, Douglas said calmly. "Seems like you want to fight again." Lewis looked at Crassus with an unfriendly expression. "Why? Is the big golden dragon still thinking about burning your dragon tail back then?" Crassus looked at Lewis mockingly. "Who asked you to trespass the Magus Tower's no-fly zone back then? According to what you dragons say, that's my absolute territory." "Humph." Lewis snorted. Michael stood between the two of them, and pointed at the octopus monster in the seal, and said, "Everyone, the enemy is right in front of us. Let's settle those old scores later. What we should be thinking about now is how to stop this fellow from escaping from the seal and harming the world." The thin seal became even more transparent after the octopus monster collided with it again. It seemed like it would disappear at any time. With Barbara's help, we managed to decipher close to 90% of the seal runes. Unfortunately, the remaining layer made all our efforts go to waste. Novin walked up with bloodshot eyes, and fatigue was apparent on his face. This seal won't last for long. We have to get more Formation Master's help. Louis retracted his anger, and looked at Novin with a serious expression. I can summon all the Formation Masters on Dragon Island to come and help immediately. Apart from Formation Masters, you can find anyone who has studied ancient history and words. What we lack is not a Formation Master, but someone who can decipher these hidden runes, Novin said solemnly. All right. Louis nodded. Its aura is not strong. Countless years of being sealed have worn away most of its life force. Why don't we try to kill it together? Douglas asked with a frown. You can try, Julian said in a hoarse voice as he looked at him. Let's try. Douglas stepped forward with his crystal armor on. His aura increased with every step he took. When he took the last step into the seal, his aura had already climbed to the pinnacle of 10th tier. He then activated his frost domain, and ice instantly froze the sealed area. Sharp icicles pierced toward the slightly dispirited octopus monster from all directions, wanting to kill it in one hit. Douglas's eyes widened. At this moment, the countless eyes of the octopus monster that had slumped into a pile after colliding with the seal suddenly lit up with a red glow. Countless tentacles waved, and smashed the icicles that were piercing towards it into shards. Dozens of tentacles wrapped around Douglas, and wherever they passed, the ice and frost would melt, unable to obstruct those tentacles at all. A powerful pressure pressed down on Douglas, and at the same time, a low and terrifying whisper sounded. Douglas was stunned on the spot. He stared blankly at the tentacles that were surging toward him. He also fell for it. Crassus smiled, but his actions were not messed up at all. As he raised his hand, several walls of fire had already risen in front of Douglas. Julian acted almost at the same time, and raised walls of ice where the walls of fire appeared. Boom! Extreme cold and extreme heat met, and there was an instant explosion. The flying ice shards and heat waves caused the tentacles to slow down slightly. Novin raised his hand and pulled Douglas back through the air. It was as if an invisible hand had grabbed him, and flung him back forcefully, throwing him out of the seal before the explosion arrived. Several tentacles reached out from the ground where Douglas was originally standing, and almost brushed past his body. The tentacles hit the seal, and that octopus monster let out an indignant growl. An ice water ball hit Douglas' face, and he came back to his senses. He instinctively took a few steps back, and could not hide the fear in his eyes. In that instant, he felt as if his soul had been dragged into a bottomless pit, and he had lost control of his body. That feeling was as if he was facing the starry sky. Even with his 1,000 years of experience, he still felt that he was insignificant. He looked at that octopus monster again, and there was more fear in Douglas' eyes. His throat moved, and he said in a hoarse voice, "Its power is far beyond our imagination. If killing it was an easy task, we would have done it long ago. It would not be your turn." Crassus pursed his lips. Apart from having a terrifying attack power, it can also easily bewitch people. More importantly, it has an extremely terrifying recovery ability. Its damaged tentacles have completely recovered, and its aura did not weaken during this process, Louis said with a serious expression. It has existed for a longer time than any race on this continent. Perhaps it had once dominated the ancient times, and even the powerhouses back then could only seal it. It was also Michael's first time seeing this octopus monster in action. Apart from being shocked, his expression became even more solemn. We can only repair the spell formation now and seal it again to buy more time for us to find and kill it completely. This is no small matter. I have to return to Dragon Island and bring all the ancient books, Louis said in a low voice. If your house also has the mural outside, I suggest you look for the mechanism properly. Perhaps the remaining half of this monster is buried under your butt, Crassus said with a smile. There is indeed such a possibility. If the seal behind that mural has been loosened, the situation on Dragon Island might not be optimistic, Novan said to Lewis. I will investigate properly when I return this time, but the situation should not be as serious as here. At least there is no leakage of demonic aura. Lewis nodded, and turned to leave. Thank you for saving me. Douglas expressed his gratitude to Crassus and the rest. He glanced at the little girl who was squatting beside the spell formation, and bade farewell to Lewis. The good news is that we have received support from the dragons. The bad news is that Chaos City is still unable to provide more help to repair the spell formation, Michael said to Crassus and the rest. Neither of these two pieces of news can comfort us. Crassus shook his head. Tell me. What other help do you need? Michael listened calmly. We are working so hard to save the world, but we can only roast rabbits ourselves. We are not keeping up with the logistics at all. Crassus frowned and said, with our status and strength, it shouldn't be too much for us to have Mamis deliver 3 meals a day, right? Seconded. Barbara, who had been squatting at the side and studying the spell formation, raised her hand. I have no objections, too. Novan nodded, and added, the main thing is that Crassus meat skewers are really, a little hard to swallow. I want a plate of Yangzhou fried rice for lunch. Julian had already started to order calmly. All right. Just let me know if you need anything. I will send someone to deliver it to you on a flying steed. Michael waved his hand. Chapter 1732. On the first day of the holiday, Amy played the whole day at Jessica's house before returning home in satisfaction. I'm so happy today. It feels great to have a holiday. Amy was eating ice cream as she looked at Meg, who was preparing dinner for everyone, with a happy smile on her little face. There's still a long holiday ahead. Meg smiled. Children were probably the happiest. They didn't have to worry about the threat of the great old ones, and were happy about the early holiday. That's great. I'm going to look for Big Sister Cece to play tomorrow. The day after tomorrow, I'm going to look for Daphne and Ignatzu to play. Amy had already started to plan her holiday with her fingers. All right, then I'll be responsible for sending you to various places. Meg nodded with a smile. A holiday without homework was blissful. However, he didn't have much time to play with Amy recently, so it was naturally best that she could spend the holiday with her friends. All right. Amy nodded happily, and then went out to play with Ugly Duckling. Mr. Meg, the High Priestess has a letter for you. Gina walked into the kitchen, took out an icy blue envelope, and handed it to Meg. All right. Meg took the letter. Lantis kept in touch with him through Gina. Their High Priestess would send a letter of gratitude to express their gratitude to Meg from time to time. However, today's letter wasn't a letter of gratitude. Honorable Mr. Meg, the core army of Lantis has basically broken free from the seal, but we've been abiding by our agreement with you to only move around within a 500-mile radius of the sea. However, some of our people have discovered the existence of other intelligent races in the nearby sea. After our observation, they should have control over this sea. Other than the surface, they would also go deep into the sea to obtain resources and food. They haven't discovered our existence yet, but as more and more of our people break free from the seal, both parties will definitely come into contact. According to what you said, Lantis is unknown to the world, and our sudden appearance might cause panic and misunderstanding among the other races. Therefore, I would like to ask Mr. Meg, how should we handle this? Should we head deeper into the sea, or try to make contact with the outside world? Lastly, thank you for lending a helping hand to Lantis as always. You are Lantist's eternal benefactor. Respectfully, Dexter. Meg looked at the letter and fell into deep thought. This is the merman army that Mamie's customers ate one beggar's chicken after another. There was no doubt that Lantist was powerful. The battle with the elves back then had already proven their combat power. Now that their core army had broken free from the seal, it meant that they were now as powerful as the elves. They were like the kings of the ocean. Although Meg wasn't the owner of Lantist, he was definitely their trusted partner. Furthermore, he had promised to receive their help twice. Alex was famous for his fighting prowess, but he was still stuck at the peak of the 9th rank, unable to break through. With just him, Irina, 30,000 night elves, and Chaos City, they still didn't have enough power to speak on the Norland continent. However, with the addition of Lantist, their speaking rights would increase exponentially, and they would only be second to the Dragon Island and the Roth Empire. Furthermore, many of the legends about the Great Old Ones were related to the ocean. Lantist might become an important partner in their search for the sealed land at the bottom of the sea. It was a very good choice to make use of this opportunity to gain the recognition of the other races. I will write a reply to him tonight, Meg said to Gina as he kept the letter. All right. Gina nodded with a smile. She looked at Meg with a blush on her cheeks. She hesitated for a while before softly asking, "Did the high priest mention me in the letter?" "I don't think so." Meg shook his head and looked at the bashful Gina with a puzzled expression. "Oh." Gina immediately turned and left the restaurant. Homesick. Meg looked at Gina's back view with a puzzled expression. Speaking of which, she had indeed not been home for some time. He could consider giving her a short break to go back to the sea. Did the high priest forget about the marriage bestowment again? Gina came out from the kitchen and sighed softly. She was 30% shy and 70% regretful. After the dinner service ended, Meg coaxed Amy to sleep early before entering the study to reply to Dexter's letter. Lantist had been sealed at the bottom of the sea for thousands of years without seeing the light of day, and had never been recognized by the world. This was unfair to a powerful race. They yearned for the world beyond the bottom of the sea. They yearned to have more contact with this world and gain more recognition. Meg pondered for a while before writing a reply to Dexter. Lantist has been submerged for many years. Perhaps they have preserved some information from the ancient times. Perhaps it can provide some help in repairing the spell formation. Irina appeared behind Meg without him noticing. Then let me add a few more sentences. Meg thought for a while before adding a few more sentences. What should we do if the spell formation is not successfully repaired? Irina asked as she looked at Meg, who was keeping the letter. Meg was silent for a while. He looked into her eyes, and calmly said, "There's no way out. We can only stand at the forefront." That's an expected answer, but I still like to hear you say it. Irina smiled. Perhaps the situation is not as bad as we think. No, it's worse than we think. Even if there are only a few runes in a spell formation that we don't understand, it would be a waste of effort. Even if there's only one layer left now, it would most likely be the most difficult layer to decipher. Irina shook her head. I'm afraid a fierce battle is inevitable. Luckily, everyone is in the water, and no one can escape. We will win, Meg said with certainty as he reached out to hold Irina's hand. Rodu, the second prince's residence. Find them, release them. You will obtain endless power and the most powerful helpers. They will allow you to truly control this world. In a secret chamber lit by a dim oil lamp, an eerie whisper could be heard. Josh looked at the dark green flame dancing in his shadow, and his gaze gradually turned crazed. He suppressed his voice, and said, "Where are they?" "My companions." "South. The gods will guide you to the right path, south." Josh squinted his long and narrow eyes. It just so happens that I'm going to Chaos City this time, bam. The wine jug shattered into pieces on the wall. Sean picked up another jug of wine, and gulped it down. Your Highness. A middle-aged man at the side wanted to say something, but stopped. He didn't know how to persuade him. Chapter 1733. Once the internal cracks appeared, it would not be easy to smooth them out. The war between the Flaming Demons and the Abyss Demons had been going on for months. The deaths of Simmons and Alfred had caused the hatred between the two races to be irreconcilable. The war had even spread to the smaller races affiliated to the two races. A war zone had appeared on the Demon Islands that was expanding day by day. The alliance that was formed back then was only in name. The various races on the Demon Islands were in a state of mutual distrust. How to resolve the internal conflicts on the islands had become a headache for the various races. Once they could not form an alliance, any of the demon races would not have any advantage over the external forces. They would not be able to start a war with the external forces. The two hooligans who wanted to fight started fighting among themselves. That saved them the trouble of hurting other people. I just don't know how the two idiots, Simmons and Alfred, managed to kill each other so thoroughly. At the end of the long table in the castle's dining hall, Dracula, who was dressed in a black suit and had neatly combed hair, was holding a crystal glass with 2 fingers. He gently swirled the scarlet red wine in the glass as he teased them. This is not a good thing for the Demon Islands. The peace conference will be held in a few days. Our right to speak will be reduced because of this, Maynard said solemnly. I think it's pretty good. When a bunch of warmongers try to represent the demons, that's the real tragedy of the Demon Islands. Dracula took a sip of red wine and smiled. With the strength of the vampires, we could have a bigger territory. Maynard looked at Dracula. You can say that to our patriarch. He always thought that the vampires did not need more territory, Dracula said nonchalantly. You are the patriarch of the vampires now. As long as you agree, I agree with the patriarch very much. The vampires have enough territory now. We don't have to accompany a bunch of fools and use the lives of our people to exchange for useless land, Dracula said with a nod. Dracula, that is not some useless land. It represents the prosperity of the vampires. Since you have obtained the patriarch's bloodline, you should take up the responsibility of a patriarch. You should lead the vampires to a stronger future. Maynard said as he looked at Dracula with disappointment. Dracula placed the glass on the table, and said with a mocking smile, Maynard, I respect you as my elder brother, so I'll call you Big Brother. But since you already know that I am one of the ancestors of the vampires, what identity are you using to order me around? The chief of the vampire clan? Or is it your so-called racial justice? You. Maynard choked. He looked at Dracula's flushed face, but he didn't know how to retort. The vampire primogenitor had a high status in the clan and was a special existence that was above the clan leader. Other than the dead Giles, the other elder would only appear on important occasions. Dracula, on the other hand, had broken through the bloodline limit and obtained the ancestral bloodline inheritance from Giles. He had become the new vampire ancestor, and his status was already above his own. I know that Giles once promised you that he would pass the ancestral bloodline to you, but you've been the chief for so many years. Don't you know that the ancestral bloodline can't be passed down just like that? Dracula stood up with his wine glass in his hand. Also, I will be going to Chaos City to attend this conference. I can take the opportunity to meet my good niece. After saying that, Dracula disappeared from the restaurant along with the black fog. Bastard! Maynard slammed his fist on the wall and growled. Obtaining the ancestral bloodline could increase one's lifespan by at least 500 years, and one's power would be far above ordinary 10th-tier vampires. However, such an opportunity was snatched away by the lazy Dracula, and ruined his long-planned plan. The August Tribe. In the black stone hall, a tall orc walked in quickly, and respectfully said to Oster, who was sitting on the high seat, "Chief, we have already received confirmation that the lass from the Fok tribe will be going to Chaos City to attend the conference personally. Rex might be staying in the tribe, so this is a good opportunity for us to kill her." "It is indeed a rare opportunity." Oster revealed a sinister smile. "I want everyone to know that those who go against the August tribe will die a horrible death. Chief, killing the chief of the Fok tribe now might cause some negative reactions. I'm afraid everyone will link it to us," an orc persuaded. "That's exactly the effect I want. I want to warn those fellows who are trying to go against the August tribe to be more obedient and follow us to conquer the world. Otherwise, they will end up like the Fok tribe," Oster said with a sinister smile. Oster sneered with a sinister expression. "Send out the most elite Black Falcons. I don't want to see her in Chaos City." "Yes." The orc who came in to report the news answered, and quickly left. "Are you sure you don't need me to go with you?" Rex asked Connie, who was checking the local specialties for her friends. "Really? Master, you can stay in the tribe and look after the house. I'm fine going alone." Connie waved her hand nonchalantly. She picked up a bag of dried fruits and checked it before putting it down again. "Besides, didn't you say that I'm the best at stealth apart from you? No one knows assassination better than me, so you don't have to worry at all." "I'm not worried about that." Rex looked at Connie helplessly. "I'm worried that you're going in the wrong direction." Connie blushed. She coughed and said, "Don't worry. I'll ride a flying mount that knows the way to Chaos City. I guarantee that I'll reach there safely." "I hope so." Rex nodded in disbelief. "Then, I'll set off early tomorrow morning. I won't disturb your sleep, Master." Connie couldn't hide her smile anymore. "I can't wait to go back to the restaurant for a big meal." The next afternoon. Over 10 orcs riding on the backs of giant black eagles stood on a cliff. They stretched their necks and looked to the north with bewilderment. "Didn't the intelligence say that she set off early in the morning? This is the only way to go from the Fok tribe to Chaos City. Our black eagle flying knights are everywhere along the way. She can't be missed. Even if she's riding on the slowest carrier pigeon, she should be here by now, right? Why isn't there any movement at all?" The orcs were discussing softly. They didn't know what the situation was, and didn't know if they should retreat or continue to defend. "Sisters, your chief is back." On the other side, Connie had already knocked on Mamie's door, and dashed into the restaurant happily with bags of various sizes. "It's better to come at the right time than early. I'm just in time for lunch." Connie's eyes lit up when she saw the table full of dishes. She smiled at Meg, and said, "Boss, do you mind adding a pair of chopsticks?" Chapter 1734. Wash your hands, and you can eat right away. Meg received the local specialties that Connie brought with a smile. They had received Connie's letter a day in advance, and she was coming to have lunch with everyone, so he specially made a few more dishes for lunch today. "Greetings, Chief." Mia bowed respectfully to Connie. You're welcome." Connie nodded slightly as she held back her laughter. Then, she immediately hugged Mia's arm with a smile, and happily said, "Big Sister Mia, and everyone, I missed you so much." "We missed you too," Mia said with a smile. "But Big Sister Connie, didn't you say you would be here in the morning? Why did you only arrive in the afternoon?" Amy looked at Connie, and doubtfully asked, "Did you get lost again?" Everyone looked at Connie carefully. They thought many people from the Fok tribe would come with Connie, but it seemed like she came alone. Connie blushed. She waved her little hand, and said, "How can that be called getting lost? I just flew a few hundred kilometers to the north, and then a few hundred kilometers to the east, but I still managed to circle back with my strong sense of direction." Impressive, right? You're really impressive. Meg clapped his hands with emotion. He almost went to the Roth Empire. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. Even though Connie had become the chief of the Falk tribe, she was still that killer with no sense of direction. Connie came out after washing her hands, and her gaze landed on Angela. Her eyes lit up, and she said, "Is this the sister who just joined the restaurant?" "Hello, I am Angela." Angela nodded slightly, and introduced herself. "Hello, I am Amy's former deliveryman, Connie." Connie also introduced herself with a smile. She couldn't help but compliment, "You are really beautiful." "Thank you." Angela's smile became even brighter. "Oh, yes. Where's Barbara? Why didn't he see her? Has she returned to the moon?" Connie sat down, and quickly asked. "Big Sister Barbara went to save the world. She'll be back soon to have dinner with us," Amy said. "Wow, it's only been a few days since we last met. Has she become so much more useful?" Connie said in surprise. "Yeah, after all, she represents the moon." Amy nodded. "All right, let's eat first. The soul of this table of delicacies is fading away." Meg clapped his hands and sounded the horn for dinner. "Thank you, Lord of Chaos City, for freeing me from those trivial matters in the tribe and giving me the opportunity to enjoy this delicious meal." Connie put her palms together and thanked him. Then, she picked up her chopsticks and picked up a piece of red braised pork that had a mixture of fat and lean. She sniffed it first, and the thick meat aroma made her feel a little intoxicated. Only then did she put the meat into her mouth. "Ah, this damned fatty." Connie closed her eyes, and was intoxicated by the red braised pork that melted in her mouth. This fatty, yet not greasy, soft, and delicious red braised pork was a delicacy that could only be eaten at Mamie's. The lean meat was crisp, dry, but not dry. The skin was smooth yet sticky, and the bite was almost non-existent, making her salivate. Her taste buds were already cheering as if they were welcoming the rain after a long drought. It was so precious. After swallowing the red braised pork, she immediately ate 2 mouthfuls of soft rice. The greasy feeling was immediately suppressed by the fragrant and sweet rice. Then, she couldn't help but have another piece of red braised pork. "I'm so satisfied. I'm so touched." Connie held her bowl and looked at Meg with tears in her eyes. "Boss, let me come back to being a delivery man again. I think this is much more blissful than being the chief." Back then, Gary and Ferdinand came up with all kinds of schemes for the chief's position. If they knew that you don't even want to be the chief anymore just to be a delivery man, I wonder what they would think. Meg looked at Connie, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. It seemed like the busy affairs in the tribe and the food that she couldn't keep up with Mamie's made Connie a little uncomfortable. "To be honest, I don't understand why they are fighting to be the chief. This is obviously a tiring and boring job, and they have to bear the expectations and future of the entire tribe, and even many tribes." Connie shrugged. If there wasn't a rebellion, she would have handed the tribe over to them without any hesitation. "However, you're the chief of the Falk tribe. Did you come to Chaos City alone? You don't even have a guard." Meg looked at Connie with bewilderment. "Your master didn't come back with you, either?" "No. I asked him to stay behind to guard the Falk tribe. He's more useful there than I am." "I'm afraid I'll be killed once he leaves," Connie said as she wrapped a piece of roast duck with her chopsticks. "You know your place very well." Meg couldn't help but chuckle. She was probably the only chief who knew her place. "Of course. I'm a killer who knows my place very well. Connie nodded in agreement before putting the duck meat into her mouth. Connie's arrival brought a lot of joy to everyone in the restaurant. They felt like they were reuniting with their friends. It's a pity that we haven't heard from Sally. I wonder if she's doing well now, Mia lamented. As one of the restaurant's first 2 employees, Sally was the closest to Mia. However, she never returned to the restaurant after she left. She'll come back to see everyone sooner or later. Meg smiled. He wondered who the elves would send as their representative to attend this meeting. He wondered if Sally, who had just become the elves' new princess, would come. After lunch, the restaurant's business hours officially began. Everyone gradually got busy. Connie stayed at the side and helped out from time to time. Anyway, no one ordered takeout apart from her master, so she didn't need to use her skills for the time being. There was a takeout in the Thunderstorm Mountains that needed to be delivered. However, Meg didn't trust Connie with the order, so it was more reliable to hand it over to the staff at the City Lord's castle. Where's that lass's head? Oster, who was preparing to set off for Chaos City, asked that orc coldly as he sat on his flying steed. Chief. We didn't manage to intercept her. That orc's legs went soft, and he knelt on the ground. With a long face, he said, "We've already set up an ambush that spanned tens of kilometers along her flight path, but we didn't see her after waiting for an entire morning. I think she might have gotten lost." Useless. Oster's face darkened. He pressed that orc onto the ground with his terrifying aura. "I gave you 1,000 Black Eagle flying steeds, but you can't even catch a lass. You're still trying to fool me by saying that she got lost. What's the use of having you?" Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1735. After the lunch service ended, Meg went upstairs to change his clothes, and pushed his bicycle out. Amy sat behind the counter with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and asked Meg, "Father, where are you going?" "I'm going to a mutton restaurant." "Do you want to come along, Amy?" Meg asked with a smile. As Connie said she was coming back in the morning, Meg didn't go to Lydon and his son's mutton restaurant to support them. Now that he was done with lunch, and Connie had Mia and the rest to chat with, he could go and complete his mission. This was a high-level mission that might give him a strength point. Sure. Amy's eyes lit up, and she jumped off the high stool with Ugly Duckling in her arms. "I like mutton. Then, we can try the mutton made by that orc uncle. It's said to be delicious." Meg brought Amy to the market on the west side of the city by bicycle. They found a mutton restaurant called Lime's Mutton Restaurant at a conspicuous spot at the entrance of the market. Lime. The combination of Lydon's and Moore's names. Why isn't it called Lime? Meg raised his brow. He felt like there was something stuck in his throat, and he had to get it out. The west side of the city was the biggest wholesale market in Chaos City. Goods transported from all over the continent were gathered here, and it was a gathering place for retailers. People came and went every day, and it was very lively. Restaurants would naturally be a place where people gathered. The good spots at the entrance were almost all occupied by restaurants. The rent for the shops was expensive, but there was no need to worry about not being able to rent them out. Harrison and George had indeed put in a lot of effort to find such a good shop for Lydon and his son. "It smells so good." Before they reached the shop, the rich aroma of mutton stew had already drifted over. Meg's and Amy's eyes lit up at the same time. The rank odor of the mutton was completely removed, and the freshness of the mutton mixed with the fragrance of the spices created an intoxicating aroma. Meg brought Amy to the front of the mutton restaurant. The front of the mutton restaurant was not small. Looking inside, it was about 200 square meters in size. There were 2 large pots that were almost as tall as a person standing in front of the door. Steam was rising from the mouths of the pots, and the alluring aroma was coming from them. It was already past mealtime, but there were still many customers in the mutton restaurant. Lydon was standing guard in front of the two big pots, while Moore was busy serving the customers in the restaurant. Harrison and George were wearing aprons and helping to clear the plates. It seemed like the two partners were also acting as temporary service staff. Many merchants passing by with large and small bags couldn't help but stop to take a look. They wanted to see what was emitting such a tempting fragrance. Then, they couldn't help but be attracted by the two mysterious pots. After hesitating for a while, they still carried their things into the restaurant. "Although I'm just full, I feel like I can eat another bowl of mutton," Amy said, licking her lips. "That's not a bad idea." Meg parked the car with a smile, and held Amy's hand as they walked into the restaurant. "Welcome," Lydon said instinctively. When he looked up and saw Meg, he was stunned for a moment before he smilingly said, "Mr. Meg, you're here." "Yes. It's the first day of business, so I'm here to support you." Meg nodded with a smile, and continued, "But I think the business on the first day is very good. It's really a good start." Meg was really envious. When Mamie's first opened, it was not easy at all to wait for the first customer to arrive. It was not like Lydon's mutton restaurant, which was so popular on the first day of business. "It's all because of your improved recipe that we could attract so many customers," Lydon said gratefully from the bottom of his heart. However, he couldn't hide the smile on his face anymore. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that he, who was just a nomad who had lost his ranch a month ago, would own his own mutton restaurant in Chaos City in the blink of an eye. The praises he heard today were more than what he had heard in his entire life. Looking at the satisfied smiles on the customers' faces, he felt the meaning of life for the first time. And all of this was thanks to Harrison and George, as well as Mag, who was a generous person who was willing to share with them. "Mr. Mac, I thought you were so busy today that you forgot about the opening of our restaurant." "We were so busy this afternoon." Harrison came over with a hint of resentment. When he saw Amy, he immediately put on a smile, and said, "Little boss is here too. What a rare guest." "Hello, Uncle Blue Fatty." Amy nodded politely, but her gaze was completely attracted by the two big pots of mutton stew. Perhaps only a giant dragon's stomach could finish such a big pot of mutton. "I'm sorry. I was held up by something this morning," Meg said apologetically. That was indeed his problem. "Hey, why are we still doing this? Come. Take a seat inside. Mr. Mac is a professional. Take a look at the restaurant set up by us three amateurs and see what needs improvement." Harrison smiled as he led Meg inside. The interior of the mutton restaurant was simple, but not crude. There were many Orc tribal elements on the wall, and the wooden tables and chairs showed how much effort was put into it. Once they entered, they saw a simple price list pasted on the wall: mutton stew, 30 copper coins for a small bowl, 50 copper coins for a big bowl. Side dishes and sugar water for yourself. The menu was very simple. The mutton restaurant only sold mutton stew. The prices were set very approachable. To the merchants who came to the market to collect their goods, the price of 30 to 50 copper coins for a meal around the market could be said to be a very reasonable price. Moreover, they could even eat meat. And next to the price list, there was a wooden board with the words, "Lime Mutton Restaurant Dining Rules" written on it. 1. This mutton restaurant serves customers of all races. 2. Customers who enter the restaurant accept table sharing by default. Customers can take a seat and order as long as there is an empty seat. 3. Please eat in a civilized manner. When there are too many customers, please line up consciously. First come, first served. 4. To be continued. Meg's eyes lit up, and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. I discussed with George, and felt that Mr. Mac's rules were really good. So, we just brought them over. There shouldn't be a problem, right? Harrison scratched his head, a little embarrassed. Of course there's no problem. I'm very glad to see that these rules can be promoted. Meg looked at Harrison and George sincerely. To be able to see these rules outside of Amy's, he did have a strange feeling. It was as if he had been holding on to something for a long time, and one day realized that it had started to change others. This feeling was indeed very special. Thank you. Moore also walked forward and bowed deeply to Meg. You're welcome. I just did something insignificant. Meg helped lighten up and casually chose a seat with Amy. He smiled and said, We've already had lunch. Give us 2 small bowls of mutton. No. I want to eat a big bowl. Amy sat down beside Meg and said firmly, and an extra bowl of rice. Bookhouse reading website. Chapter 1736. Lydon carried over 2 bowls of mutton that were almost full to the brim. He looked at Amy and said with a smile, You're so cute, little girl. What a big bowl. Thank you, Uncle. She couldn't wait to pick up her chopsticks, and said to Mag, Father, I'll start eating first. Mag nodded as he looked at the big bowl of mutton in front of him with glowing eyes. Go ahead. Meg nodded with a smile and picked up his chopsticks. He also wanted to try the improved mutton stew to see if it had really become a delicious dish. Oh whoa. Amy put a piece of mutton into her mouth and chewed. Her eyes lit up, and her chewing speed immediately increased. As she chewed, her body could not help but sway slightly from side to side. Meg glanced at Amy, who was swaying tactically. It seemed like this mutton stew suited Amy's taste very well. He also picked up a piece of mutton. The mutton was cut in a rather casual manner. It was about the size of an adult's mouth, and the color was bright red. It looked very appetizing. The aroma wafted over along with the steam. The strong rank odor of the mutton from before was almost negligible, and in its place was a rich mutton aroma. Other than that, there was also the aroma of various spices. One particular aroma caught Meg's attention. It was an indescribable aroma. It was a spice that he had never seen before, but now that it had appeared in this mutton stew, it made the taste of the mutton even more special. Last time, the strong rank odor made Meg give up as soon as he put it in his mouth. But this time, he was looking forward to trying it out. He opened his mouth and put the whole piece of mutton into his mouth. With a light bite, delicious and rich gravy flowed out of the soft mutton. Compared to the freshness of the mutton soup, the gravy was much richer. The rich meat aroma splashed in his mouth, causing his taste buds to instantly jump for joy. Chewing carefully, the mutton was soft but not mushy. The more he chewed, the more fragrant it became. Meg could feel the presence of the spices. Together, they created a delicious space rich in layers, and that faint special aroma was like a layer of fog, causing one to accidentally step into a delicious trap. The mutton stew might not be perfect, but in Meg's heart, it was definitely a delicacy, and a very unique one at that. Lydon and his son, as well as Harrison and George, were all looking at Meg nervously and expectantly. They were like students waiting for their teacher to announce the results of an exam. After all, they hadn't let Meg try their improved mutton stew before. Meg swallowed the piece of mutton in his mouth and immediately put another piece into his mouth. A smile appeared on his face as he calmly enjoyed the delicious taste in his mouth. Can I have a bowl of rice? Meg put down his chopsticks, looked up at Muir, and said with a smile, If such a delicious mutton stew isn't accompanied by a bowl of white rice, it seems to be missing something. All right, please wait a moment. Muir's eyes lit up and he quickly turned to walk toward Good-for-Nothing. A smile also appeared on Lydon's face. Having received Meg's approval, he felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He had not let Meg down. "Wow, it seems like Mr. Mac has a very high opinion of this mutton stew," Harrison said with a smile. "If even Mr. Mac is satisfied with this mutton stew, it seems like our mutton restaurant's business will not be bad," George said with a happy smile. "The rank odor of the mutton is completely removed. The ratio of spices is also very suitable, and the heat is just right. It's soft but not mushy, and the more you chew, the more fragrant it becomes," Meg commented seriously. Then, he looked at Lydon curiously, and said, "But if I may ask, there's a very special spice added to this mutton stew. What is it? I don't think I've ever seen it before." Lydon thought for a while, and his eyes lit up. He took out a half-foot-long black branch from the cupboard at the side, and said, "You're talking about this, right?" Meg took the branch and sniffed it. His eyes lit up, and he nodded. "Yes, that's the fragrance. This is a type of short tree that grows in the mountains near our tribe. I call it yen. Herders usually cut it down to use as firewood. Once, I accidentally dropped a branch in when I was cooking mutton, and realized that it tasted surprisingly good. So, I kept the habit of adding yen to my mutton stew," Lydon said, a little embarrassed. "Your naming skills are really unusual." Meg looked at him with admiration. However, he was indeed very interested in this spice called yen. The appearance of a spice was often due to many coincidences. Before Lydon came, perhaps no herder would have thought that the wood they used to light the fire every day could make mutton so delicious. Delicacies were gradually developed from such coincidences. Thank you to our great ancestors. Thank you to those wise people who were brave enough to try. Meg sighed in his heart. He returned the spice to Lydon, and said with a smile, "It's pretty good. This spice will become the most unique symbol of your mutton stew." Hee hee. Lydon laughed good-naturedly. "Your rice." Moore quickly placed a bowl of rice in front of Meg. "Thank you." Meg nodded on my behalf. "See, Father. You still want to eat rice." Amy tilted her head and looked at Meg proudly. "Yes. My Amy has extraordinary intuition when it comes to food." Meg nodded with a smile. He picked up his chopsticks and ate a mouthful of rice. Then, he picked up a piece of mutton and put it into his mouth. The rice was paired with the delicious mutton stew. Even though Meg and Amy had already eaten lunch, they still enjoyed it very much. Lydon even specially scooped a small bowl of mutton for Ugly Duckling to eat alone. "Meow, meow," Ugly Duckling cried out happily as it ate. This was the first time it had received such treatment. After all, it usually only ate leftovers when it went out, depending on Amy's mood. Not long after, the rice and mutton in their bowls were almost emptied at the same time. Burp, the two of them burped at the same time. Then, they looked at each other and smiled. "Father, we seem to be too full." Amy winked at Meg. "Because the mutton is too delicious." Meg nodded with a smile. "Would you like another bowl?" Lydon rubbed his hands together as he asked, feeling overwhelmed by the unexpected favor. "No, no. I really can't eat anymore." Meg quickly waved his hands. If he hadn't eaten lunch, he would consider another bowl. However, he was indeed a little full now. "Save my bowl first." "I'll eat it next time," Amy reminded him seriously. Okay. Lydon nodded with a smile. Meg took out 8 silver coins from his money pouch and handed them to Lydon. He said, "Thank you for your hospitality. The mutton stew is indeed very delicious. I'm sure your business will be very good in the future. I can't accept this money. This is your restaurant, too." Lydon immediately retracted his hand. He looked at Meg and sincerely said, "There's something else I'd like to ask you. This is my first time opening a restaurant, and I'm suddenly facing so many customers. How can I make the customers as satisfied as possible?" Meg looked at Lydon with a smile and said, "You can only achieve success if you stick to your initial principles." Bookhouse website. Chapter 1737. Meg used these words to replace the 80 copper coin meal fee. As for whether Lydon and his son could keep those words, that would be up to them. "Father, have you learned how to make mutton stew?" Amy sat at the back of the bicycle and asked Meg expectantly. This dish was created by Uncle Lydon. "I didn't learn how to make it from him." Meg shook his head with a smile. "If Amy still wants to eat it, I'll bring you here next time." "Okay." Amy nodded happily. Meow, Ugly Duckling poked its little head out of the basket. Although it was carsick, it still didn't want to lose its presence. Amy poked her head out from behind Meg and said decisively, "I'm not bringing you." Meow. Ugly Duckling retracted its head, aggrieved. Ding. Congratulations, host, for helping Lydon and his son achieve their dream. You have obtained a chance to spin the mysterious wheel. Right at this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded in Meg's mind. Mysterious wheel. Isn't it a big gift pack? Meg raised his eyebrows. The mysterious gift pack is a chance to draw any valuable item, including high-tier recipes, a strength point, super-grade kitchenware. What are the chances of drawing a strength point? Meg's eyes were already completely lit up, and even his breathing had quickened. 1%. Isn't that too low? I've made such a huge contribution to this world, giving them the chance to taste the delicious mutton stew, and even helped a father and son who wanted to open a restaurant to achieve their dream, and there's only a 1% chance of drawing a strength point. You have to know that Dad is dying now. If that octopus monster escapes from the seal, this world will be destroyed, and Amy's will no longer be glorious. The main mission of me becoming the god of cookery will also become nothing. And you will become a useless system that will be mocked by countless systems, and even kicked out of the group chat, Meg said deeply. Who leaked the news? Ahem, according to the system's deduction, whether or not the host can obtain physical strength points will not directly help in resealing the great old ones. Even if you obtain physical strength points, there is no way to prevent the great old ones from destroying the world. Nonsense. If I recover my strength, at least I can run faster. If I run faster, then I'll have a chance to make a comeback. Then you'll have a chance to re-enter the group. Meg said seriously. Does that sound reasonable? But something doesn't seem right. The system muttered. Are there any chance cards for this mysterious roulette wheel? Is it the kind of card that can increase the probability of drawing a certain option? This seems possible. That's right. Meg smiled. Probability enhancement card, 1% chance increase. Can be stacked. Selling price, 10 million copper coins per piece. It can be stacked. 10 million copper coins for one. Meg frowned. System, this is daylight robbery. It's a temporary prop. The price is generally higher. Please make the purchase at your discretion. The system sounded smug. All right, give me 99 cards, Meg said without much hesitation. 99 cards. Host, are you sure you want to buy? The system seemed to be in disbelief, and quickly gave a price, 990 million copper coins. Yes, I want 99 cards with a 100% chance of drawing the physical strength points, Meg said with certainty. Money was saved to be spent. He had collected quite a bit of wealth from Dragon Island and the Falk tribe. The total was about $1 billion. This time, he spent all of it in one go. However, in the face of a world that might become chaotic, power was far more important than money. Therefore, he didn't even bat an eyelid when he spent the money. He wanted a 100% chance of breaking through to 10th tier before the peace conference started. Ding! 990 million copper coins have been deducted. The remaining amount will be converted from the host's own items. 99 chance increase cards have been issued. The mysterious roulette wheel has been activated. Host, please start the lucky draw as soon as possible. The system's brisk voice sounded. It even added a background music of money falling into a bag. Useless. Meg pursed his lips as he looked at the roulette wheel that appeared in his mind. As he used the chance increase cards one by one, there was only 0. 5 physical strength points left on the roulette wheel. Perfect. Meg pressed the start button with a smile. The needle symbolically spun a few rounds before finally stopping. Congratulations, host. You have drawn physical strength plus 0. 5. The system's fake congratulations sounded. Very good. Meg accepted that precious physical strength point with satisfaction. This wasn't a simple lucky draw. It was a lucky draw that could change his fate. Although money couldn't solve all problems, it could solve most problems. For example, bribing the lousy system. Father, are you smiling? Amy asked curiously as she tilted her head and looked at Meg's side profile. Meg, would you believe me if I said I was Superman? Meg asked with a smile. Of course. Of course, Father is Superman. A super powerful lord. Amy said with a nod. It's not easy to be Superman. Meg's smile was full of confidence. He seemed to have finally gained the courage to shoulder everything. At the same time, a heavy responsibility appeared. The old feud with the Roth Empire's royal family, Amy's future, the great old ones that he had to face directly, the situation of the Norland continent at the crossroads. He couldn't avoid all of these. After returning to the restaurant, Meg didn't share this joy with anyone. He made himself a pot of tea, went to the study on the 2nd floor, and locked himself in the study. He needed to calm down. When his power recovered to 10th tier, all his plans would be different. He knew that he had to shoulder some things and fight for some things. 10th tier lightning. It must be wonderful, right? Meg picked up the teacup and finished it in one gulp. A smile appeared on his face. Sally, this is your first time representing the elves in front of all the other races after you became the elven princess. Irina should be there too. I hope your performance won't disappoint me. In the starry cave in the wind forest, Helena looked down at Sally with a cold voice. Sally nodded slightly and said, I will do my best to protect the elves' dignity and interests. Helena looked at her deeply and said, Go. Yes. Sally turned and walked out of the cave. High Priestess, if you let Princess Sally lead the team, will she lose to Irina in terms of aura? A superior elf asked worriedly. Can you beat Irina in terms of aura if I send you? Helena glanced at him. That elf shrunk his neck and didn't dare to say anything else. This is something she has to face sooner or later. This is just the simplest test. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1738. All the races were invited to this meeting before the peace conference, and all the invitations were in accordance with the rules of the peace conference. This made all the races on the Norland continent focus their attention on Chaos City. On the seemingly peaceful continent, the border armies of all the races were sharpening their swords in preparation for the war that would ensue after the failure of the peace conference. Even the dwarves, who had trade relations with all the races, had started to limit the number of merchants entering and leaving Isen Castle. They might even seal off the passage into the castle at any time. With the arrival of the various races' representatives, the city lord's castle's concierge department started to get busy. Luckily, the city lord's castle was already familiar with the series of meetings and arrangements, so it was not messy. Dicus walked into the study and said to Michael, "City Lord, Miss Hill has just sent someone over. She said that the first train's trial run is completed, and it will depart in an hour's time." "Very good. It's time for us to set off too." Michael stood up and walked to the door. "City Lord, the August Tribe's chief, Oster, the Flaming Demon's chief, and a few other representatives have just arrived at the City Lord's castle. Do you want to meet them first?" Dicus reminded. "There's plenty of time to meet them tomorrow. They can't be compared to the railway workers who have worked hard for countless days and nights." Michael walked out of the door without any reluctance. "All right." Dicus kept the folder in his hand, and quickly followed after Michael. In a forest about 15 kilometers north of Chaos City, there was a straight railway running through the forest. At the end of the railway was a stone wall. At this moment, a steel monster was being dragged out of the stone wall by a few orcs, and stopped in front of the stone wall. This was a steel monster that was 5 meters tall and over 20 meters long. Its long chimney reached into the sky as if it had grown a horn. The sides of the railway were filled with fatigued-looking workers and designers, but their eyes were shining. On the train, there were also 10 odd technicians doing the final inspection and debugging to ensure that the train could depart successfully. After 3 months of hard work and the hard work of thousands of outstanding blacksmiths and designers, they finally created this steel monster. Only they knew how much effort they had put in. "Young mistress, the news has been sent to the city lord's castle and Mamis," the secretary said to Hill, who was standing at the side. "All right, then let's wait for the city lord and Mr. Meg to witness this moment that might change the course of the world." Hill nodded slightly and smiled as he looked at the steel behemoth that was reflecting a metallic luster under the sunlight. Although she had already become the most famous career woman in Chaos City, or even the Norland continent, the voices of doubt didn't stop just because she had led Buffett Bank to greater heights over the years. The most they talked about was that she had only inherited Buffett Banks. No matter who sat in that position, they would be able to make a lot of money. The Hill disdained to defend such ridiculous words, but she had always wanted to make her own breakthrough outside of Buffett Bank. The appearance of the steam locomotive allowed her to see this possibility. It was a potential market that could surpass the banks, a possibility that could change the world. Meg, who had just brought Amy back to the restaurant, met the staff sent by the Hill. Then, he brought Amy onto the other party's horse-drawn carriage and rushed to the Steam Locomotive Research Center. The steam engine had changed the world before, and Meg believed that it could still change the world here. With the help of capital and politics, it would change people's lives and the way they traveled at an even faster speed. And today was a historic moment. The results of the hard work of countless staff over the past few months would finally be revealed. The first steam locomotive on the Norland continent would have its first official test run on the railway. "Father, where are we going?" Amy asked curiously as she sat in the horse-drawn carriage and looked at Meg, who couldn't hide his excitement. She had rarely seen such an expression on her father's face. "To the north. Take Amy to the train." Meg smiled. As the initiator of this project, he had invested quite a lot of emotions into it, and had even participated in a few of the debugging and research works. He was just as anxious and expectant as all the staff members about the results of this official road operation. "Train. A car on fire." Amy blinked. "No, it's a car that runs on fire." Meg shook his head with a smile. "Oh, then it must be burning the horse's tail, right? Why don't we try it now?" Amy lifted a corner of the carriage's curtain and looked at the 4 unicorns that were running wildly in front of them. She was eager to give it a try, and a bluish-purple flame had already lit up on her fingertips. It's not burning the horse's tail. Amy will know in a while. Meg quickly grabbed Amy's little hand and looked apologetically at the staff whose eyes were gradually widening due to nervousness. Oh. Amy put down the carriage's curtain obediently. Then, she turned her gaze to the staff and curiously asked, "Uncle, are you very hot? Why is there so much sweat on your forehead?" Ahem. I might be wearing a little too much. That staff tugged at his slightly thin uniform awkwardly. He had heard about this little princess from Amy's before, and knew that she was a little magic prodigy with two unbelievably powerful masters. The horse-drawn carriage left Chaos City and headed north. Meg and Amy arrived at the Research and Development Center almost at the same time as Michael and the rest. "Mr. Mac, you're here too," Michael said with a smile as he got down from the black Cheelan's back, and looked at Meg, who was coming out of the horse-drawn carriage. "City Lord." Meg nodded slightly at Michael as a greeting. His gaze landed on the steam locomotive that was parked quietly on the tracks at the side. The angular front of the locomotive was distinct, and the black metal body was giving off a cold metallic glow. "Uncle City Lord, are you here to take the train too?" Amy came out of the horse-drawn carriage, and looked at Michael in surprise. "Yes." "Little boss, are you here to take the train with Mr. Mac too?" Michael asked Amy with a smile. Apart from Master, no one knows fire better than me. If there's any danger, I can protect Father," Amy said with a nod. "That's great. Then, little boss will have to protect me too," Michael said seriously. I'll have to think about it." Amy rested her chin on her hand as she pondered. "City Lord, Mr. Meg, you're here." Right then, Mr. Hill walked up, and said to the two of them, "The first steam locomotive is ready to depart. There's still 15 minutes before it departs. Do you have anything to say to everyone? 10 minutes. The three of us will take 3 minutes each," Michael said with a smile as he boarded the train first. Chapter 1739. The manufacturing of the steam locomotive and the laying of the railway were a result of Buffett Bank's investment regardless of the cost. Together with Chaos City's support, they were able to build the steam locomotive in just a few months, and at the same time, connect Chaos City, the Elven Railway. The City Lord's castle's contribution was no less than that of Buffett Bank's. Many of the workers present were from the City Lord's castle. Hence, as soon as the City Lord Michael boarded the steam locomotive, the crowd applauded enthusiastically. "Thank you for your hard work, everyone. On behalf of the City Lord's castle, on behalf of Chaos City, and on behalf of all the citizens on the continent who might have benefited from avoiding a war because of you, I would like to extend my highest respect to all of you," Michael said in a loud and sincere voice before bowing deeply to everyone. The crowd applauded thunderously, and many of the workers couldn't help but turn their faces away to wipe their tears secretly. Michael straightened up, and nodded at Hill, indicating that she could come up. The whole process took less than 2 minutes. Hill looked at the exhausted faces below the stage, and said with the same sincerity, "I am Hill Buffett. Thank you for your double efforts during this period. I promise that apart from the normal salary, all the workers will receive half a month's salary as a bonus after all the work is done." Cheers erupted below the stage again, and everyone smiled joyfully. Due to the uniqueness of the project, the salary level was already much higher than outside work. They didn't expect to receive half a month's salary as a bonus, which was a huge surprise to many people. Hill looked at Meg. Everyone also looked at Meg. Many of the workers recognized this young man. He was someone who even the chief engineer respected very much. He would be invited to every important debugging, and they would listen to his opinion before making changes to the steam locomotive. Furthermore, it was said that he was the designer of the steam locomotive, and also the initiator of this project. They were gathered here because of this man. He overcame all kinds of impossibilities and created this incredible big guy. 10 minutes, and you left me 7 minutes. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly, but everyone's gazes were already focused on him. As the initiator, he had to say a few words, and there were indeed many things he wanted to say. Meg held Amy's hand and walked up the wide and flat metal stairs of the steam locomotive to the platform in front of the locomotive. The boiler had already started burning, and the entire locomotive was warm. Even the metal railings were warm. The little girl is so cute. Yes, she must have a beautiful elf mother. This gentleman is also very handsome. Everyone looked at the father and daughter and couldn't help but whisper to each other. Hello, I'm Meg, the head chef and owner of Amy's. I'm also the father of Amy, a contributing student. Just like you, I'm an ordinary but indispensable member of the steam locomotive's creation process, Meg said with a smile. Everyone smiled knowingly. Although this was Meg's humble words, it made them feel equal and respected, as well as a sense of recognition for their work during this period of time. I'm very touched to see this steam locomotive finally see the light of day. It's a bold and imaginative idea, and a group of capable partners. You've created a miracle, and perhaps it's also the prelude to a new era. You will be remembered in the history of the Norland continent. On your epitaphs, it can be written, one of the creators of the steam locomotive. This is an honor that belongs to you. It's the honor of this world to have you, Meg said from the bottom of his heart. Warm applause broke out below the stage, and tears glistened in the eyes of the people below the stage. Meg looked at them quietly, and felt his vision blur a little. He had the opportunity to become one of these engineers, but unfortunately, his conditions didn't allow it. His family was simply too rich. However, his spirit was with them. A hint of surprise flashed across Mr. Hill's eyes as he looked at Meg. Michael was looking at Meg with admiration. Of course, there was also a hint of surprise. In his impression, Alex wasn't someone who could say such sentimental words. These uncles and aunties must be very powerful and great people, right? Amy stood there obediently and looked up at Meg. Then, she looked at the staff standing below, and thought to herself, that's right. There's no need to repeat the praises. You're the best team I've ever seen. What I want to talk to you about is the future of the steam locomotive and the railway. I want to tell you what a great thing you're doing now, Meg said with a smile after the applause died down. Everyone's voices gradually lowered as they looked at Meg expectantly. They knew that the steam locomotive might change some things, but they couldn't predict what changes would happen. Meg continued, the steam locomotive that burns oars to obtain kinetic energy will replace most of the transportation and become the first choice for medium and long-distance travel and freight transport. Our railway tracks will be spread all over the Norland continent, and people will be able to choose to take the train to any place. The world will be integrated at an unprecedented speed, and many industries and barriers will be greatly impacted. Perhaps in the near future, we will be able to see a world that is gradually integrating, and the railways will be like a net that connects the entire continent together. The pairs of eyes gradually lit up. Some were in disbelief, and some were elated. They got together and made a steam locomotive that could run by burning a fire. However, they had never thought that this steam locomotive would have such a huge impact on the Norland continent. They could feel their blood boiling just by listening to Meg's description. Mr. Hill's eyes also lit up as he looked at Meg. He pursed his lips as if he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. Whether it's Alex back then or Mr. Meg now, he is always impressive. Michael took the lead to clap his hands as he looked at Meg with admiration. He lamented in his heart, he is so much calmer now. It seems that the ambush 3 years ago and little Amy still had a big impact on him. Listening to the loud applause and looking at the pairs of sparkling eyes, Meg was a little surprised at his improvisational ability. Maybe he should have learned from Rebus and wandered around the mobile phone industry. Maybe he could have held a MS-10 product launch. After the applause stopped, Mr. Hill took a look at his watch and nodded slightly at Meg. It's a great honor to be able to participate in the trial run of Peace with all of you here today. Now, let us witness this moment together, Meg said loudly. Woo! A long whistle sounded, and white smoke rushed out of the chimney. The huge train started to tremble slightly, and then slowly moved forward with a sizzling sound. Book Guesthouse Reading Website. Chapter 1740. A melodious whistle sounded, and the huge steam locomotive started to tremble slightly before moving forward slowly. Everyone watched this scene with their eyes wide open. They watched as the steam locomotive started to move slowly, witnessing this moment that would go down in history. All the hard work he had put in over the past few months had paid off perfectly at this moment. They had succeeded. The train is moving. There were thunderous cheers, and many people threw their hats into the sky. Meanwhile, Amy, who had been very obedient and quiet all this while, suddenly had flaming wheels appear under her feet, and her magic caster's staff appear in her hand. She pointed at the steam locomotive with a vigilant expression. What kind of demon is that? It's a train. Meg quickly carried the little one down as he tried to hold back his laughter. Amy kept her flaming wheels, but still frowned, and said, but it's shouting at me. Hill, who was at the side, twitched his mouth. His gaze drifted to the sky as he tried his best not to laugh out loud. It's reminding everyone that it's about to move, and it's blowing the whistle. Meg explained with a smile. He didn't dare to let his great aunt blow the train. Otherwise, Gong Qingshi's heart would be broken. Oh. Amy sized up the locomotive for a while more before putting her magic caster's staff away. Under the watchful eyes of the many staff members, the train slowly left the departure point and moved forward steadily. Its speed gradually increased, and it gradually became a black dot moving forward in a straight line in their line of sight. The staff members on the train also burst into cheers. Meg could feel their joy, and he could empathize with them. He had never thought that he would be able to travel on a steam locomotive on the Norland continent. Everything had happened too quickly, and it felt like a dream. Meg stood at the front of the locomotive and felt the steam locomotive's operating condition. The speed had already been raised to the maximum, which was about 50 kilometers per hour. It was an incredible speed, and the operation was relatively stable. However, there was still a lot of room for optimization in terms of shock absorption, and the jerks during the journey were still a little strong. For the steam locomotive's first official trial run, this was already an impeccable result. Now, I completely believe what you said previously. Michael looked at Meg with admiration. This is indeed an invention that can change the world. I hope for world peace. Meg smiled. Michael nodded. I think this big guy will make the representatives of the various races change their minds. In terms of trade, it will bring about disruptive changes to the world. Maybe we can have a drink to celebrate. Hill smiled. Her assistant took out the red wine that had already been prepared and poured it into 3 crystal glasses. To the victory of this battle against time, Michael said with a smile as he took the glass. For world peace. Meg picked up the wine glass. Happy cooperation. Hill raised his glass. After a brief celebration, Michael got out of the car early. There were still many things waiting for him to deal with at the city lord's mansion. Meg, on the other hand, took Amy on a tour of the interior of the train. 2 bare-chested, stocky dwarves were shoveling coal into the boiler. The blazing flames made the temperature in the boiler room quite high. So the train is a car that burns fire, not a car that spits fire. Amy muttered thoughtfully. She looked up at Meg and asked, those 2 dwarven uncles are having a hard time. do you need my help? No need. Amy's flames are different from theirs. They might cook the train. Meg quickly stopped Amy from helping. If she threw a fireball, the boiler might explode. Let's go. Let's go to the carriage at the back to take a look. Meg led Amy into the next carriage. The second carriage was a passenger carriage. According to Meg's suggestion, rows of seats were custom-made. There were 4 seats in a row, and each carriage could accommodate 100 passengers. However, there were no customers today. The carriage was full of steam locomotive designers and testers. They were busy recording various data during the operation of the train. Mr. Meg. Chief Engineer Blair stepped forward and shook Meg's hand excitedly. We did it. Yes, we did it. Meg also held Blair's hand tightly. Looking at his increasingly balding appearance, it was obvious that he had put in a lot of effort for this project. Grandpa, I recommend you try our restaurant's Buddha jumps over the wall. Your hair will grow back, Amy said seriously as she looked at Blair's hair. Hee, okay. Blair smiled and nodded. He looked at Meg and said, this little girl is so cute. She takes after her mother. Meg replied a little proudly. However, he soon talked to Blair about some of the problems he felt earlier. Meg participated in almost the entire trial run process and gave his own opinions on some of the optimizations. The trial run was very successful. At least, they successfully drove the train out and back in one piece. Mr. Meg, thank you for taking the time to participate in the trial run, Hill said to Meg as he stood in front of the carriage. That's what I should do. Meg nodded. There's something I would like you to consider. Are you willing to participate in the development of a series of steam engine and steam locomotive products with me? Whether it's shares or remuneration, you can ask for them yourself. Hill looked at Meg seriously and said, you are the most suitable person I have ever seen to do this. I believe that you and I can create a huge business empire that far surpasses Buffett Banks. I agree with you on this point. Meg looked at Shear with a smile and shook his head as he said, however, I'm very sorry. Compared to creating a huge business empire, I prefer cooking and taking care of children. That kind of happiness cannot be replaced by any amount of money. Hill was a little disappointed, but he quickly smiled and said, that's an expected answer. However, I will always keep this position for you. If you change your mind, you can let me know anytime. Okay. Meg nodded with a smile. Where's the child you mentioned? I want to see her, Lewis asked Jinx as he walked out of the Castellan's residence. She's working as a waiter in a restaurant. I can bring you there, Jinx said. Waiter. Lewis frowned. How can a child of the Golden Dragon tribe be a waiter? That's nothing. The little princess of the Frost Dragon tribe is also a waiter there. Jinx shrugged nonchalantly. He looked at the incredulous Lewis with a smile and said, Uncle, that restaurant is not ordinary. It doesn't seem to be something embarrassing to be a waiter there. Could it be opened by a powerhouse? Lewis's brows were still tightly knitted. That's not it. You'll know when you see it for yourself. Jinx kept him in suspense. End of chapter. Chapter 1741. Have you contacted that child recently? Lewis asked Jinx as they sat in the horse-drawn carriage that the city lord's castle had specially sent. I gave her my contact details, but she never contacted me once. She didn't come to Dragon Island to look for me either. Jinx shook his head and helplessly said, perhaps Dragon Island isn't that attractive compared to that restaurant. Lewis frowned and became even more puzzled. What's the background of that restaurant? Even Dragon Island can't compare to it. It's not about the background. You'll know in a while. Jinx shrugged. It was really not easy to explain. If anyone dares to stop my Golden Dragon Tribe's child from going home, I will never let him off, Lewis said coldly. Jinx blinked and didn't answer. The horse-drawn carriage stopped, and the coachman's voice came from outside. Dear guests, we have arrived at Amy's. Uncle, this is Chaos City, after all, and we are guests. No matter what happens later, you have to bear with it. After all, we're here to facilitate negotiations. It's not good to fall out with the host, Jinx specially reminded before alighting from the carriage. Lewis replied in a deep voice. They were facing a great enemy, and they still had to rely on Chaos City to get all the races to put aside their prejudices and face the enemy together. They really couldn't afford to offend Chaos City. Then, let's go to this special restaurant. Jinx alighted from the horse-drawn carriage first. Lewis followed closely behind. He frowned as he looked at the long line in front of the restaurant. What are they doing now? Waiting in line to eat, Jinx said calmly. He had already seen such a scene the last time he came. We have to wait in line to eat. I'm from the Golden Dragon Tribe, Lewis said with displeasure. Even if their city lord Michael came to eat, he would have to line up at the back obediently, Jinx said with a shrug. Who exactly is this restaurant owner? Could it be opened by some old monster? Lewis was even more puzzled as he looked at the beautiful restaurant door with a frown. Not really. This restaurant owner is just an ordinary human. Jinx shook his head. An ordinary human. Lewis raised his brow. However, her daughter is quite impressive. She is the magical goddess who was accepted as a disciple by both Crassus and Julian, Jinx replied. I have some recollection of this, but even if it's because of his daughter, this boss dares to make Michael wait in line outside? Lewis was still confused. You might not believe it, but most of the people waiting in line outside are willing to do so. Furthermore, the restaurant hasn't opened for business yet. These are all customers who came to line up in advance and are afraid that there won't be any seats later, Jinx said helplessly. Willing. Lewis sized up the customers in the queue. There was no lack of powerful people from various races in the queue. None of them showed any dissatisfaction with the queue, and the atmosphere seemed to be pretty good. That's right. The culinary skills of the owner of this restaurant are unparalleled on the Norland continent. You'll know once you try it, Jinx said with a smile. Human food is not to our liking. Lewis pursed his lips in disdain. Don't say that too early. I think the queue here is a little shorter. Why don't we queue here for hot pot today? Jinx was about to walk to the queue at the side when he saw Lewis standing there. He softly said, Don't you want to see that child? You won't be able to see her from here. All right. For the sake of that child, I'll force myself to go in and take a seat. Lewis followed Jinx to the back of the queue. He squinted at the customers standing in front of him, and pursed his lips in disdain. They were just people that he could kill with his dragon's breath. What a rare sight. Jinx, who was standing behind Lewis, moved his lips, and tried not to laugh out loud. Oh, we're late today. There's definitely no tofu pudding. Harrison and Julian jumped off the horse-drawn carriage, and sighed when they saw the long queue at the entrance of the restaurant. We haven't had hot pot for a while. Why don't we have it tonight? Julian suggested. Sure. Harrison nodded, and walked to the back of the two queues in front of the designated hot pot area. The queue was getting longer. After waiting for a long time, Lewis looked a little impatient. He was the chief of the Golden Dragon Tribe, a top powerhouse with a high status among the dragons. Yet, he was actually queuing up with a bunch of mortals for a meal. This was simply, welcome, Amy's. Before Lewis, who was getting angrier and angrier, could express his anger, the door of the restaurant, which had been closed all this while, suddenly opened outwards. A young human walked out with a smile. The queue that had been stationary all this while suddenly moved forward. The customers entered in an orderly manner, and greeted that young human familiarly. "Uncle, the door is open." "Let's go," Jinx reminded. Louis retracted his gaze, and followed the queue forward. For the sake of that child, he would not stoop to Jinx's level for the time being. However, when Louis and Jinx reached the door, they were stopped by a lady. Yabamiya smiled at the two of them and said, "I'm sorry, dear customers. The designated hot pot area is full. If you don't mind, you can sit at that table for 4 over there. That's the only seat left. You want us to sit outside and eat?" Louis frowned even before he looked at her. "Uncle, this is that child," Jinx reminded softly. Louis's gaze landed on Yabamiya, and his eyes lit up immediately. He could not help but exclaim, "She actually has such a pure bloodline." Yabamiya took half a step back instinctively. She recognized Jinx, but she was a little frightened by this uncle's expression. Is she serious when she took half a step back? Louis frowned slightly. He was the most respected chief and senior of the Golden Dragon tribe. Usually, the juniors would be full of smiles when they saw him. Why is Louis here? Elizabeth, who was standing at the back, saw Louis, and her expression changed slightly. She wanted to go forward, but after hesitating for a while, she stopped in her tracks. The Golden Dragon tribe probably would not hurt Mia, but if she appeared too close to Mia in front of them, it might cause her trouble instead. "Mia, we have something to talk to you about in private," Jinx said to Mia with a smile. We intend to bring you home," Louis added with a nod. "Sorry, I'm at work now. I don't have time to talk to you." Mia shook her head slightly, and put on a smile again. "Please take a seat, dear customers. The customers behind are still waiting. No pop-up window." Chapter 1742. Louis wanted to say something, but Jinx stopped him, and pulled him to sit at one of the 4 tables at the side. "What are you doing?" Louis glanced at Jinx. "Uncle, we can't rush this. This child is very stubborn. Let's sit down and have some food first. We'll talk to her privately when she's free later," Jinx said softly. "You want me to wait for her?" Louis frowned. "You've seen it for yourself. Her royal bloodline is so pure. You can't find another junior with such a pure bloodline on Dragon Island." Jinx looked at Louis suspiciously. "You really didn't do anything special with any lady in Chaos City all these years. You think this child has something to do with me?" Louis widened his eyes. "Ahem. I'm just making a wild guess." Jinx coughed dryly. "After all, apart from you, there aren't many in our Golden Dragon tribe who can pass down such a pure royal bloodline. Apart from this time, I haven't been to Chaos City for over 30 years. Louis shook his head, and looked at Yabamiya with a doubtful gaze. This child's Golden Dragon bloodline was indeed shockingly pure. Not to mention that she was only a half-dragon. Even the bloodline of the 2 WIRMS on Dragon Island would rarely reach such a pure level. The purer the bloodline, the easier it was to stimulate the potential of the bloodline, and the faster she could grow. Given this child's bloodline, it wouldn't be difficult for her to break through to the 10th tier in the future. She might even become the top powerhouse of the Golden Dragon tribe. We have to bring her back. There are fewer and fewer children with potential these years. I have to nurture her personally, Louis said in a low voice. Yes. It's such a pity for such a seedling to wander outside. Jinx nodded in agreement. Uncle, can we share a table? Just then, a voice interrupted Louis and Jinx's conversation. The two of them turned around at the same time, and their gazes landed on Harrison and George. Two humans made of fats. What did you call me? Uncle. Louis narrowed his eyes, and a dangerous aura flashed across his eyes. Harrison and George felt a chill on their necks, and subconsciously shrank their necks. However, they had no intention of retreating. Sharing tables was a tradition at Amy's, and it was only out of courtesy that they mentioned it. Now that there were only 2 seats left in the designated hot pot area, there was no reason for them to give up. It's fine. Have a seat. Before Louis could flare up, Jinx had already invited the 2 of them to take their seats with a smile while winking at Louis. Then we won't stand on ceremony. Harrison chuckled as he sat down beside Louis. His voluptuous body took up more than half of the table. Louis subconsciously moved to the side a little before coming back to his senses. I actually gave up my seat to an ordinary human. Thanks, Uncle Ha. He then looked at Louis curiously, and asked, the golden armor you're wearing is really extravagant. Which tailor shop did you get it custom-made? Can someone of my size do it? The corners of Jinx's mouth twitched. He turned around silently and tried not to laugh. I'm afraid no tailor shop can make it, Louis said coldly. That's true. I'm afraid the tailors in Chaos City don't have such skills. Harrison nodded in agreement. He retracted his head and moved his chair a little to the side. He could already feel that the atmosphere was a little cold. When they ate at Amy's, everyone would chat a little when they shared a table. If they hit it off, they would become partners, and they could even share a few drinks together the next time they ate. However, these 2 middle-aged men in flashy golden armor were obviously not part of this group, so he did not want to make a fool of himself. George also gave Harrison a look, hinting him not to say anything. He could tell that these 2 were not ordinary people. It would not be good if they accidentally got into trouble. Elizabeth held Yabamiya's hand gently, and softly said, Don't be afraid. That person is the chief of the Golden Dragon tribe. He's not a bad person, and won't hurt you. Mia nodded slightly. She thought for a while, and said, But what if he wants to bring me back? What should I do? Elizabeth looked into her eyes, and said, It's up to you whether you want to leave or not. All right. Mia nodded. The 4 of them just sat there and stared at each other. The atmosphere was a little strange. Harrison shifted his butt uncomfortably. If he had known, he wouldn't have been in such a hurry. Now, he even felt uncomfortable eating hot pot. Louis began to reflect on why he had to squeeze at the same small square table with 2 humans for a meal. Furthermore, he was eating human food. What would you like to order? Right at this moment, a gentle voice sounded. Mia had arrived at the table with a smile on her face. Harrison wanted to say something, but he quickly shut his mouth. He turned to look at Louis and Jinx, and said, The 2 of you arrived first. Please order first. This. Jinx flipped open the menu. This was his first time eating hot pot. He couldn't help but frown when he saw the various dishes on the menu. Pig's brain. Can the brain of such a stupid creature be eaten? Wouldn't it be assimilated by it? Tripe. How dare they serve such a dirty thing on the table? Duck intestines. This restaurant is ridiculous. Louis was fuming with rage. Do you eat hot pot often? What's good? Jinx had already started to ask Harrison shamelessly before Louis flared up. If you're talking about eating hot pot, then you've asked the right person. Harrison patted his chest and said, Based on my experience of eating hot pot for 28 meals a month, if your appetite is big enough, just order all the dishes on the menu. It'll be a regret in your life if you miss out on any one of them. This method of yours is really not troublesome at all. Jinx nodded. He looked at Yabamiya and said, Then I'll order 2 servings of all the dishes on the menu. Louis raised his hand to reject him. You don't have to order for me. I won't eat such, Uncle, I've ordered. You can order whatever you want. Jinx turned around and interrupted Louis. How about you? What do you want? Yabamiya asked Louis with a smile. Louis retracted his hand awkwardly. He looked at Mia's clear eyes, and hesitated for a while before saying, Then I'll order 2 servings of all the dishes. All right, please give me a moment. Mia nodded. Then, she helped Harrison and George order. You've hidden your skills well. Harrison looked at the 2 of them with admiration. Chapter 1743. You've already become a vegetarian. Louis scrutinized Jinx. Uncle, it's right to try new things. Times have changed, Jinx said calmly. Vegetarian dishes should not be on a giant dragon's menu. I will hold a meeting with the elders to discuss whether giant dragons who eat vegetarian dishes should be banished from Dragon Island. Louis frowned. That child must have eaten quite a lot. Jinx pouted angrily. Louis choked, and added, She hasn't returned to our tribe, so she can avoid punishment for not knowing the rules. But at least half of the dishes you ordered were vegetarian, Jinx said. Louis's face darkened. He looked at Jinx and said, Do you think I can't lift my knife, or did Chaos City give you special courage? Hey. Uncle, let's talk nicely. Jinx quickly gave in and chuckled. We are just doing as the Romans do. That child is very opinionated. She's not an orphan who will cry just because we say we're here to bring her home. We have to put in more effort. Eating vegetarian dishes is a way to get close to young people. If you don't want to try it, you are closing the door to interacting with young people. I think this child is not bad, too. I want to take her in as my disciple. Louis raised his eyelids and fell into deep thought. The hot pot and dishes were served very quickly. The 4-seater table was equipped with a 4-square pot. While it was clean and hygienic, it also prevented the awkward situation of accidentally taking away another person's meat and causing a bloody conflict. Your dishes are all here. There is a hot pot dining guide on the table. Please enjoy, Yabamiya said with a smile before leaving. Didn't they say that humans' cooking was very complicated? Why was the food served without cooking? Louis looked at the multi-level dining cart filled with all kinds of ingredients, and fell into deep thought. That's it. It was obviously Jinx's first time dealing with such a situation. He looked at the duck intestines and duck blood soaked in ice water, as well as all kinds of fresh vegetarian dishes. It's your first time eating hot pot, right? Then, I suggest you read this hot pot dining guide seriously. The way to eat hot pot is simple and interesting, but there are still some tricks. Once you master them, you will be able to eat delicious hot pot on your own, Harrison reminded in a friendly manner. Louis averted his gaze and showed his disdain for this. As the honorable chief of the Golden Dragon tribe, his pride would never allow him to eat such lowly food. Jinx, on the other hand, accepted the hot pot guide and read it carefully. He was not ashamed to ask when he encountered something he did not understand. By the time the red oil in the pot was almost boiling, he had already grasped most of the theoretical knowledge of hot pot, and made himself a mildly spicy dipping sauce. Then, he picked up a duck intestine with his chopsticks eagerly, and prepared to have his first hot pot experience. Do you know that duck intestines are the internal organs of ducks? And you actually want to eat it now? Louis questioned Jinx spiritually. Jinx, who was originally eager to try, fell into deep thought after hearing Louis's words. He looked at the duck intestine swaying in his chopsticks. Crunch crunch, today's duck intestines are still so fresh and crispy. It's simply too wonderful. Harrison praised as he chewed on the duck intestine that he had just cooked happily. As he spoke, the second duck intestine was in the boiling red soup, and slid into that plump mouth again. Crisp chewing sounds could be heard, followed by uncontrollable smacking sounds. Louis and Jinx's throats moved at the same time. This is too wonderful. Jinx's eyes had completely lit up. The effect of the cold water that Louis had poured on him was completely gone. I actually have a desire to eat duck intestine? Louis, on the other hand, was deep in thought. For a giant dragon that had lived for almost 2,000 years, such a ridiculous thought was something that could not be ignored. Tripe is indeed my life. Meanwhile, George, who was at the side, was eating a plate of tripe, and was very touched by himself. Uncle, I'll start first then, Jinx said to Louis eagerly. Jinx couldn't wait to tell Louis. He imitated Harrison and put the duck intestine in his hand into the boiling red soup pot. However, when he picked up his chopsticks again, the duck intestine was already gone. It's gone. Jinx was slightly taken aback. Yes, it's gone. Uncle, your duck intestine will lose its soul if it's gone for more than 3 seconds, Harrison said regretfully as he took a look. That won't do. Jinx used his sharp divine sense as a 10th-tier powerhouse, and successfully picked up the duck intestine in the boiling soup in the next second. Then, he held his breath and focused on cooking the duck intestine. The 8th time. Jinx picked up his chopsticks from the pot, and looked at the duck intestine that was hanging in the bright red soup. It had already turned from its original stretched-out state to a small curled-up section. He glanced at the hot pot instructions, and then dipped the duck intestine into the dipping sauce with a sacred expression before putting it into his mouth. The spiciness of the hot pot base exploded on the tip of his tongue as if an ant had bitten it. Jinx's face turned red immediately, and he was so shocked that he almost jumped out of his chair. There's poison in the dish. Louis looked a little alarmed. He had already raised his right hand, and was ready to save him. Dregs, dregs, dregs. Right at this moment, Jinx suddenly started chewing quickly. The duck intestine made a crisp sound, and he could feel the refreshing feeling when his teeth cut through the thin duck intestine. The redness on Jinx's face gradually faded, and was replaced by surprise and joy. Apart from the numbing spiciness, the crispy and chewy duck intestine gave Jinx's teeth a very novel and refreshing feeling. Moreover, as his taste buds got used to the spiciness, the fragrance under the spiciness started to show its power. The more he chewed, the more fragrant it became. Jinx swallowed the duck intestine and exclaimed, "What an incredible texture, what a shockingly delicious taste." This small piece of duck intestine has actually become such a delicious and special food after the ritual baptism of this red soup. It's really amazing. Louis silently retracted his hand, and frowned as he looked at Jinx, who had already picked up his second piece of duck intestine. His gaze was a little judgmental, with a tinge of anticipation and curiosity. The corners of Jinx's mouth twitched, and he continued to rinse the duck intestine. His exaggerated expression did not seem like something a dragon powerhouse should have. After rinsing the duck intestine, Jinx's target turned to the tripe soaking in the ice water. "Uncle, I know what this is. You don't have to remind me." Jinx looked at Louis, who was about to speak with his mouth twitching. Then, he eagerly picked up a piece of tripe and scalded it in the hot pot. He skillfully dipped the red tripe into the dipping sauce, and put it into his mouth with a satisfied expression. "This is the taste, it's on top of my head. No pop-up window." Chapter 1744. The crispy duck intestine and tripe went into his stomach with a crunch, the smooth pig brain was irresistible, the tender beef was covered in red oil, and the enoki mushrooms were floating in the pot. Jinx was already in a good mood. His forehead was full of sweat, and steam rose from the top of his head as though he was in a sauna. With a slurp, another bunch of enoki mushrooms went into that big mouth. Louis turned his face away, and swallowed his saliva for the 18th time. Satisfying. Jinx praised. He picked up a plate of spicy beef and poured it all into the pot. He turned back to look at Louis, who hadn't touched his chopsticks, and asked, "Uncle, are you really not going to try it?" As he spoke, his gaze had already drifted to the 2 plates of tripe and duck intestine on the dining cart beside Louis. He chuckled and said, "Then, do you want me to help you finish these plates?" Jinx's hand was only halfway out when he was hit by a pair of chopsticks. He quickly retracted his hand, and looked at Louis innocently as he said, "Uncle, I thought you didn't want to eat it." "I don't want to eat such things," Louis said seriously. Louis said in all seriousness, "However, I've been looking for a suitable child all these years. I think I've found one now. In order to better understand the thoughts of young people, I've decided to sacrifice myself and try things that young people like nowadays." Jinx rolled his eyes. "So, do you want to eat some duck intestine or some pig brain first?" "Beef." Louis picked up a plate of beef and poured it into the pot. Then, he poured the entire plate of enoki into the pot as well. The enoki can only stay in the boiling pot for 5 seconds. You might not be able to get all of it in time. Before Harrison could finish his sentence, the enoki in the pot suddenly floated up, and hovered above the pot at the height of a chopstick. Louis picked up a piece of enoki beef with his chopsticks, and calmly picked up a piece of enoki beef that was covered in red oil. The rest of the enoki beef was still floating in the air. "Holy shit!" Harrison's eyes widened, and he looked at Louis in a different light. "This is a godly skill for eating hot pot." George was also amazed. The customers who were lining up at the side were also amazed. Everyone was looking for a way to cook 20 slices of enoki beef in one go and eat to their heart's content in one go at the same time. It actually appeared. It's just a small trick. Louis could feel the astonished gazes from around him, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He hesitated for a moment, and still put the thin and curled piece of beef into his mouth. "What is this smell?" Louis's eyes lit up with red flames. His right hand subconsciously grabbed the corner of the table, and the wooden corner of the table instantly shattered into pieces. If Jinx hadn't stabilized the other side of the table in time and neutralized all the force, the entire wooden table would have been ruined along with the hot pot. "Calm down, it's not poison, it's a new smell. It's called spicy," Jinx quickly reminded him. Louis, who had a faint dragon horn on his forehead, finally regained control of his condition. The impact of the spicy aroma also receded a little, and the tender beef began to radiate its charm. WIRM's huge bodies and powerful abilities allowed them to go months without eating, but the amount they ate each time would be terrifying. Hence, they would usually choose larger magical beasts as their food. Beef was one of Louis's favorite foods, and he could eat 20 to 30 bison each time. Of course, that was the whole cow that had been butchered. It was his first time eating beef that had been sliced as thin as paper and was barely enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. But what surprised him was that apart from the discomfort he felt when he tasted the spicy aroma for the first time, the beef actually tasted a little special after the spicy aroma subsided. The texture of the tender beef was countless times finer than that of the whole cow. The huge difference between cooked beef and fresh beef shocked him. The beef tasted so delicious under the stimulation of the spicy aroma. This incredible taste! Louis couldn't help but exclaim. This wasn't the first time he had eaten cooked food, but this time, it swept away all the bad memories and impressions he had of cooked food. The chopsticks slid through the air, and the dozens of slices of enoki beef in the air all went into Louis's mouth in the blink of an eye. It's a little too little. Louis smacked his lips as if he hadn't had enough. Harrison, who hadn't had time to shut his mouth, glanced at the hot pot and reminded, the beef is done too. Very good. Louis picked up his chopsticks again, and the spicy beef immediately jumped out of the hot pot before he ate it piece by piece. That's more like it. Louis put a piece of beef into his mouth. Compared to the enoki beef, the beef piece gave him a little more satisfaction. What kind of godly way is this? Is this the correct way to open a hot pot? Eyes, I've learned it. Hands, are you having sex? The surrounding crowd was full of praises. Uncle, did you come to eat without telling me? Jinx also looked at Louis suspiciously. Or are you a hot pot genius? Genius? Ha! There's no such thing as a genius in this world. There's only hard work that you can't see. Louis poured the 2 plates of duck intestines into the hot pot together, and then controlled them to float up and down in the hot pot. After 7 or 8 times, they were all fixed. Then, he picked up 3 to 5 pieces with his chopsticks and put them into his mouth. He chewed with a big mouthful, and the crisp sound seemed to bite into everyone's hearts. Tears of envy flowed down from the corners of their mouths unknowingly. Louis finished the duck intestines, and poured in the 2 plates of tripe. He calmly said, "Of course, I'm an exception." Louis's hot pot eating skills shocked everyone. At the same time, it also stimulated the potential and creativity of many customers who were seriously eating the hot pot with their chopsticks. They all started to show their prowess, and made the hot pot more interesting again. "Boss, should we stop them?" In the kitchen, Yebamiya asked softly as she looked at the ingredients flying in the air in the designated hot pot area worriedly. No. This is the hot pot that's truly unique to the Norland continent. It's an interesting way of eating. Meg shook his head with a smile. As long as the customers still followed the restaurant's rules, he didn't want to interfere with how they ate the hot pot. That was their most basic freedom. Being able to try different ways of eating brought about different experiences. That was one of the reasons why people liked eating. "Uncle, I think some of the old rules can still be changed." Jinx looked at the empty dining cart beside Louis, and smilingly said, "What do you think?" "I think it's not a big problem to eat some vegetables occasionally." Louis put the last piece of cabbage into his mouth. He looked up at Jinx and calmly said, "However, I don't think anyone will know that I've eaten it before." Jinx said. Chapter 1745. Goodbye, boss, Amy. Mia bade farewell to Meg and the rest before holding Elizabeth's hand and walking out of the restaurant. After a day of business, it was time for the night lessons again. However, as soon as the 2 of them walked out of the restaurant, Elizabeth let go of Mia's hand, and consciously kept a distance from her. Mia looked at Elizabeth doubtfully. However, she soon noticed 2 burly men jumping out from the bushes at the side. "Little girl, we meet again," Louis said with a smile as he looked at Yabamiya. He glanced at Elizabeth and smiled kindly at her. "So Miss Elizabeth is here too. We haven't seen each other in a long time." "Hello." Elizabeth answered indifferently. Although the Golden Dragon tribe and the Frost Dragon tribe didn't get along well, Louis was her grandmother's elder. "But, are you really not the ones who are waiting for me?" Yabamiya asked suspiciously as she glanced at the bushes that had obviously been squatted on. "Yes, we are waiting for you." Louis nodded slightly with a smile. "We are here to bring you home. You are a child of the Golden Dragon tribe. You shouldn't be stranded in Chaos City, and you shouldn't be a waiter in a restaurant. Now, you should go home." Yabamiya took a step back instinctively. She shook her head at Louis and said, "I grew up in Chaos City. My mother is from Chaos City. I like Amy's, and I like being a waiter. This is my home." Louis looked at Yabamiya, who took a step back again, and his expression stiffened. As the first naturalized persuader, ever since he developed this homecoming tactic, he had been successful in every endeavor with the wandering golden dragons. He didn't expect to be defeated by this child. Child, this is the chief of our golden dragon tribe. He is one of the most powerful people in this world. It is such an honor for him to personally bring you home. You are still young and don't understand. For a giant dragon's long lifespan of thousands of years, such restaurants will appear countless times in your life. You shouldn't waste your time on being a waiter. When you return to Dragon Island, you might even become the next chief of the Golden Dragon tribe. Jinx said earnestly. Uncle, you said the same thing the last time you came to eat hot pot. Yabamiya shook her head slightly. But that's not the case. There's only one Amy's, and she'll only appear once in my life. Besides, being a waitress isn't a waste of time. I think it's a very meaningful thing. You were here for hot pot before. Louis turned to look at Jinx with a scrutinizing look. Jinx was a little embarrassed, and his gaze was a little evasive as he said, I'm just trying to get some information. Then why did you pretend to be trying it for the first time? Ahem. Was it because you said that a vegetarian giant dragon would be banished? I couldn't possibly self-destruct. Jinx said innocently. He loves enoki mushrooms. He ordered 10 servings of enoki mushrooms the last time, Yabamiya added. Madam, please don't tell on me. Jinx begged with a bitter face. I'll deal with you slowly when we get back. Louis glared at him before turning to look at Yabamiya. Child, your golden bloodline is very pure. Do you know who your father is? Where is your mother? I've never seen my father before, and I don't know who he is. My mother has already passed away, Yabamiya said with a dejected expression. Louis looked at Yabamiya pitifully and angrily said, If I find out who this bastard son is, I'll definitely teach him a lesson for you. Count me in. Jinx was equally indignant. Elizabeth, who was at the side, took a few deep breaths before slowly unclenching her fists. I like this job now. I like Amy's. I like Chaos City. So, I don't want to leave here. Yabamiya looked at Louis with a troubled expression and said, But my powers seem to be getting stronger, and I don't know how to control them. At times like this, you need a powerful teacher, Louis said. Someone like me. Jinx stepped forward without hesitation. Get lost. Louis kicked Jinx away and smilingly said to Mia, Child, I can take you in as my disciple, and personally guide you on the cultivation path of the Golden Dragon. Really? Yabamiya's eyes lit up. However, she soon worriedly said, But, won't I have to leave the restaurant and go to the Dragon Island? Louis looked at the conflicted Mia, and pondered for a while before saying, As long as you acknowledge me as your master, if you really can't bear to leave this restaurant, I can give you 10 years. You can continue to stay here in these 10 years, and I will come to Chaos City once a month to teach you the cultivation method. What do you think, 10 years? Yabamiya pondered. She wanted to stay in the restaurant, but Louis had already given her a huge concession. She instinctively looked at Elizabeth. Elizabeth nodded slightly. She was also shocked by Louis's concession for Mia. With the guidance and protection of the Golden Dragon Tribe's #1 powerhouse, Mia's future would be smooth. She might even get that golden throne on the table. Seeing Elizabeth nod, Yabamiya finally made up her mind. She looked at Louis and nodded vigorously. I'm willing. Good, good, good. Then, from today onwards, you will be my only disciple. Louis looked at Yabamiya with satisfaction. He thought for a while, and took off a golden gemstone ring from his thumb, and passed it to her. This is. Yabamiya received it hesitantly. Louis smiled and said, Master didn't specially prepare a gift for you this time. This is a space ring, and there are some small things inside. Take it as my gift for accepting you as my disciple. Yabamiya looked at the golden ring in her hand. Although she didn't know what was inside, she could guess that it had to be very precious. She looked up at Louis, and could feel the warmth and care in his eyes. It was the care of an elder. I have a master too. A master just like Aime's master. Yabamiya's mood suddenly became a little strange. She was an orphan who had never seen her father, and had lost her mother at a young age, but now, she had a sister, friends, a job, and a master. Master, Yabamiya called out to Louis as she clutched the ring tightly. Good disciple. Louis nodded with satisfaction. He thought for a while, and tore off a small piece from his golden armor. A golden light flashed, and it became a golden dragon scale the size of a fingernail. A thin golden necklace pierced through the dragon scale, and a dragon scale necklace appeared. Good disciple, wear this dragon scale necklace with you at all times. If you are attacked, it will automatically protect you. Also, it has my aura on it. Even those old things will be wary of it. Thank you, Master, Yabamiya said gratefully as she accepted the necklace. What a pity. She's such a good seedling. If I had known, I wouldn't have reported it. Jinx was already jealous. Chapter 1746. That's great. I have a master too. Big sister, do you think I can become as powerful as you in the future? Yabamiya had a ring on her finger and a golden necklace around her neck. She held on to Elizabeth's arm happily with a longing look on her face. Louis and Mia agreed to start teaching her cultivation in a few days before leaving with Jinx. Your master is one of the most powerful beings on Dragon Island, and also the most powerful being on the Norland continent. With him teaching you personally and providing you with unlimited treasures, you will become more powerful than me in the future. Elizabeth looked at Yabamiya dotingly. The future is bright. Wow, that sounds great. Yabamiya's eyes sparkled. In that case, I will be able to protect you, big sister. Elizabeth stopped in her tracks and looked at Yabamiya with a smile. We will all become very powerful. No matter if it's the Golden Throne or the Frost Throne, we will be able to take back what father obtained back then. The Golden Throne. Yabamiya furrowed her brows slightly. Shoo, don't say anything later. Right at this moment, Elizabeth suddenly let go of Mia's hand and shielded her behind her at the same time. She looked at the empty street in front of her with a grave expression. Yabamiya looked ahead in confusion. There was nothing on the street, so why was Elizabeth so nervous? Come out, great elder, Elizabeth said with a cold expression. A hexagonal snowflake appeared on the ground in front of them, and a figure in an icy blue robe appeared. Elizabeth, why do you have to be so wary of me? Douglas said with a sigh. Father said that we must always be on our guard against our enemies and those who can watch us die, Elizabeth said calmly. Rankster's words are always refreshing. Douglas nodded slightly. Elizabeth was silent as she looked at him warily. Douglas's gaze went past her and landed on Yabamiya. Then, he couldn't help but ask, little girl, who are you to Louis? Yabamiya looked at Elizabeth, and thought of her earlier instructions. She hid behind her better, and didn't answer. She is Louis's new disciple, Elizabeth answered for her. New disciple? Douglas was shocked. He had known Louis for thousands of years, and had never heard of him taking in a disciple. But he took in a new disciple in Chaos City. However, there was no mistaking Louis's aura on the little girl. She must have received some sort of token from him to remind the old guys that she was under his protection. Douglas's gaze landed on Elizabeth again, and he said in a low voice, "Go back. You still have a chance to sit on the frost throne." "Is there a chance?" A mocking smile appeared on Elizabeth's cold face. "Do you think I should accept such charity gratefully?" Douglas looked at Elizabeth and coldly said, "Rankster's daughter doesn't need charity. The Frost Dragon tribe won't give charity to a tribesman. Since you don't want to go back now, I will wait for you to ascend the Frost Throne with your own abilities, just like your father did back then." The moment he said that, the frost dissipated, and Douglas disappeared too. "He seems to have left." Yabamiya stepped forward and grabbed Elizabeth's hand gently. She then realized that her fingertips were cold, and her palm was a little damp. "Let's go." Elizabeth's expression quickly returned to normal, and she held Yabamiya's hand as they walked forward. "Is he the bad guy who almost killed Big Sister?" Yabamiya asked carefully. "No." Elizabeth shook her head slightly. "But he's not a good person either." Yabamiya clenched her fists and said, "Then let's wait until Mia becomes stronger before we go and defeat this guy." "All right." Elizabeth's lips curled into a smile. The moonlight elongated their shadows as they walked forward hand in hand. At the entrance of the city lord's castle, Josh alighted from the horse-drawn carriage and said to Dikis and the others, "There was an accident on the way, so we arrived late. Sorry to trouble you all to welcome us. Please send my regards to City Lord Michael. I will definitely pay him a visit tomorrow." Dikis took out a gilded guidebook and handed it to Michael with a smile. "You're too kind, Prince Josh. There will be staff members who will bring you, Princess Vanessa, and the rest to the villa to rest. Tomorrow's itinerary is also in this guidebook. You can take a look at it yourself." "I'm so hungry." Vanessa stood behind Josh and clutched her stomach with an aggrieved expression. She looked at Dikis and asked, "May I know if the city lord's castle still provides dinner?" "After you've settled down, the city lord's castle will prepare food and send it to your villas." Dikis nodded. "I want to eat Mamie." Vanessa stopped mid-sentence. She thought to herself with resignation, "What am I thinking? Mr. Mac must be coaxing Amy to sleep right now. He won't cook for me. As long as it's food." "Thank you," Vanessa corrected herself. "This way, please." A staff member led the Roth Empire's delegation into the city lord's castle. "Big Brother Josh, who were the people who ambushed us today? Why did they ambush us?" When they returned to the villa, Vanessa came to Josh's room while waiting for dinner. She looked at Josh, who was sipping tea at the table, with a hint of lingering fear on her face. "We still can't confirm which power they belong to, but I've already sent someone to report this to Royal Father. I believe we'll be able to get to the bottom of this very soon," Josh replied calmly. "How despicable. How dare they ambush us? Luckily, we have more people, and President Richard came with us," Vanessa said angrily as she clenched her fists. "Don't worry, I'll protect you," Josh said to Vanessa with a smile. Vanessa nodded. Then, she looked at Josh with a smile, and said, "Now that we've arrived at Chaos City, I can move around freely from tomorrow onwards, right? I haven't seen Uncle Abraham for a long time. I want to pay him a visit." "Sure. I'll get someone to send you over tomorrow." Josh nodded. He flipped open the schedule on the table and calmly said, "I see that the schedule says that we'll have a meeting at Mamie's tomorrow." "A meeting at Mamie's?" Vanessa's eyes lit up, and she immediately came forward. The first line of the schedule was indeed to have breakfast and a meeting at Mamie's. The meeting would last for 1 day. I think it's all right for me to visit Uncle Abraham later. As an important member of the Roth Empire's delegation this time, I think it's very important for me to attend the meeting on the first day to showcase the glory of the Roth Empire," Vanessa said seriously. "Yes, that's it. Chapter 1747. Shouldn't vampires live in castles? What is this? A bungalow. You're the vampire princess, Countess Bartoli, and the niece of the new vampire ancestor. How can you let yourself suffer like this? Dracula said to Camilla with a pained expression as he stood in the middle of the yard. I'm sick of living in a dark castle. Now, the rich people in Chaos City are living in villas with big yards. Camilla rolled her eyes as she hugged the black cat, and said, Do you know how much I spent on this house? A total of 300 million copper coins. If I were to go to the mountains outside the city, I could build 10 castles with this amount of money, 300 million. Dracula's eyes widened as he looked around. The scenery was indeed not bad. The yard was facing a small lake. Although the two-story house was not as grand as a castle, the design was quite novel and unique. Where did you get so much money from? Dracula looked at Camilla suspiciously. I'm the vampire princess, Countess Bartoli, and the niece of the new vampire ancestor. Camilla chuckled and said, Can't I borrow money if I don't have it? You can do that. Dracula's eyes widened. I borrowed it in the name of the vampires. Anyway, that old fellow sold me out twice. I'll just take it as my interest, Camilla said matter-of-factly. Dracula nodded thoughtfully. Sounds like it's quite legitimate. Of course. Am I the kind of woman who can be sold off so easily? No. Dracula shook his head. You're a woman worth 300 million. But why are you representing the vampires in this meeting, uncle? Isn't that person usually the most enthusiastic about such things? Camilla looked at Dracula with confusion. Because I'm all grown up now. He can't defeat me. Dracula smiled smugly. Even his shoulders started to shake uncontrollably. Indeed, the fist is the law. Camilla's lips curled up crazily as if she could already imagine that scene. But, Uncle Dracula, I heard a rumor about you in Chaos City, Camilla said to Dracula with a strange expression. I've only just become a patriarch. Have the rumors of my handsomeness already spread to Chaos City? Dracula took out a glass of red wine from somewhere and took a sip. He sighed and said, It's really lonely. No, it's about the rumors about you eating grass for money. Camilla shook her head. Dracula's expression froze as he turned around to look at Camilla in disbelief. How did you know? It's just a rumor I heard by chance. Camilla shrugged. Who else knows? Dracula's voice was filled with killing intent. Irina. Camilla did not hide anything. Sigh. This girl doesn't have any sense of confidentiality with her partners. Dracula sighed deeply. But I'm very curious. How many tickets did you collect back then? Camilla asked curiously. It's a secret. Dracula shook his head. Then, did you really agree to her for money back then? Camilla asked. Of course not. How could a vampire with noble character like me do something like that for money? Dracula said seriously. It's just to return a favor. As if I'd believe you. Camilla rolled her eyes. Dracula, Dracula. A figure appeared on the wall behind the villa, and smiled at Dracula. I heard you came to Chaos City. You're indeed here. Your partner is here, so I won't disturb you. Camilla carried the cat into the villa very tactfully. It's been so many years, but Irina is still so beautiful. Dracula smiled at Irina, who jumped down from the wall. Irina walked around Dracula, and clicked her tongue in wonder. I didn't expect you to still be so greasy after becoming a patriarch. This is called gentlemanly, not greasy. Dracula retorted seriously. Gentlemanly equals perverted. Have times changed? A warm-hearted gentlemanly is such a beautiful adjective. How can it be equated with perverted? Yes, times have changed. I'm here to collaborate with you this time. Why don't we set up a vampire patriarch herbivore exhibition together? Let's treat it as a 10-year anniversary event. You've become the famous patriarch of the vampires this time, so the price of the tickets can be multiplied a few times. Also, with the convenient transportation in Chaos City, the tickets will definitely sell well, Irina encouraged. Really? Dracula's eyes lit up, and he was eager to try it out. However, he quickly came back to his senses. He took a sip of wine, tidied his clothes, and seriously said, "No, I'm representing the vampires now. If I do something like that again, I'll be embarrassing the vampires. Furthermore, I've already become a patriarch. Do I still lack that bit of ticket money? Let's set the price at 1,000 copper coins per ticket. If 100,000 people come, that'll be 100 million copper coins." No. All right. That's not very good. Chaos City has a population of 1 million, and it's connected to all the major races. The floating population is more than the fixed population. If 1 million people come to watch the exhibition, we'll earn 1 billion copper coins just from the tickets alone. If we launch the Patriarch Herbivore series and sell it at 1,000 copper coins per ticket, we'll earn even more. That'll be 10 billion copper coins. Isn't it 2 billion? That's not important. What's important is that it's a lot of money. Irina said with a smile. No, it's too much. I have to think about how to spend this money. First, I'll build a big castle, and then I'll have a bunch of maids. This life is wonderful. Dracula's lips curled up crazily as he started to imagine the beautiful life in the future. Camilla, who was eavesdropping at the door, was shocked. That works too. Irina continued, now that the whole continent's attention is on Chaos City, let's make an announcement first. I've even thought of the exhibition name. It'll be called World's Most Powerful Vampire Patriarch Herbivore Diary 10th Anniversary Touring Exhibition. Isn't that good? It sounds pretty cool. Dracula nodded. Although he felt that something was not right, he somehow felt that it was not bad. All right, that's settled then. I'll go back and get them to prepare the poster. See you tomorrow. Irina waved and left. Hey! We haven't discussed how to split the profits. Dracula quickly said after he came back to his senses. Uncle, you're not really planning to hold another herbivore exhibition, are you? Camilla opened the door and looked at Dracula strangely. Cough, cough. Child, how can this be called a herbivore exhibition? This is a health exhibition to promote a healthy lifestyle. Dracula coughed dryly, and said seriously, do you know why I was able to become the first vampire to break through and become an ancestor in the past 1,000 years? Herbivore is a very important key. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.